correspondent in Davos. She told Andrew Marr it's going to take a lot of diplomacy to restore trust.
Until you have the European Union leaders, it's a physical meeting. They're all rushing back to Brussels to make this meeting to discuss Greenland. Until that issue they feel secure and settled with, I don't think we're going to be able to move forward with the agreement the president struck with Ursula von der Leyen and the continent last year.
The president also complained once again that the US has never gotten anything from being part of NATO. Also this evening, a woman will be sentenced in March after holding a vulnerable woman against her will for more than 25 years. 56-year-old Amanda Wixon from Tewkesbury in Gloucestershire repeatedly beat her victim and made her clean and care for her 10 children. The woman first arrived at Wixon's home as a teenager in the 90s and is now in her 40s. Detective Sergeant Alex Pocket from Gloucestershire Police has told LBC what officers discovered when they found her.
The victim had her head held down. It was clear that she was extremely scared. She had short hair. She looked extremely malnourished. She was in sort of scruffy, untidy clothes, and she looked particularly unkept. The whole property was extremely poor conditions. Her bedroom, the walls weren't painted. There was mould on the ceiling, mould on the walls.
Prince Harry says the Daily Mail made his wife's life a misery as he became emotional while giving evidence against its publisher. He's accusing Associated Newspapers of unlawful information gathering, which it denies. LBC reporter Helen Hoddinott has been at London's High Court.
Prince Harry told the court his life has been open season, that it has been since he was a teenager, with every aspect of his personal life delved into, saying that having to sit in court and have the Daily Mail claim that he doesn't have any right to privacy is disgusting.
And an amber weather warning for rain has been issued for parts of north-east Scotland from midnight until 6 p.m. tomorrow. The Met Office is warning homes and businesses could become flooded and there may be travel disruption. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 11 points at 10,138. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.14. LBC weather, showers in the west tonight with patchy rain in the east, more continuous rain in north-east Scotland, lows of 3. Persistent rain lingering over north-east Scotland tomorrow, cloudier elsewhere with showers in the south and west, patchy rain in the north, a high of 11 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. 4 minutes past 7 on LBC. Do watch us over the next 3 hours. We're streaming the whole programme live on Global Player, the LBC app and the LBC YouTube channel. Well, another day, another rambling speech from the President of the United States, this time at Davos. But it was the same subject matter, really, as last night. He said that he wanted to annex Greenland, but ruled out using military force. So he's backed down on that. He also backed down on threats of military action to Iran if they continued killing protesters. They did continue killing protesters, and there was no military action. He backed down on Chinese tariffs some time ago. He does seem to have a reputation for issuing bellicose threats and then not following through with them. He's become what's known as the taco president. Trump always chickens out. And I want to ask you in this hour one question. After he's backed down from using the US military in both Iran and Greenland, is it time to stop taking Trump's threats so seriously? Or do you think, well, no, we have to take him seriously? Any American president that issues military or trade threats would be silly if we didn't take him seriously. There are some people say, well, you have to take him seriously, but not literally. 0345 6060 973. Well, during his speech at Davos this afternoon, the president said this.
We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. Okay? Now everyone's saying, oh, good. That's probably the biggest statement I made, because people thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland.
Well, he's kind of the meatloaf president, isn't he? Sort of, I'll do anything to get Greenland, but I won't do that. Simon Marks joins us, LBC's US correspondent. Do you believe he's the taco president, Simon?
I'm not convinced he is the taco president, Ian. Certainly not on a permanent, you can always trust that it's going to happen basis. And I'm not sure the extent to which Donald Trump actually climbed down today. It felt to me like he was climbing up, in fact, given that yesterday he did not strike the kind of resolute tone towards Greenland that he struck in that speech at Davos, and made some absolutely breathtaking and entirely false claims, particularly about the history of Greenland, insisting that in the past it was owned by the United States. It's part of North America. It's our own territory, he said. He falsely suggested that Greenland had been handed over by the United States to Denmark at the end of the Second World War, which is not the case, that it was somehow an error of history that he now needed to correct. I mean, all of this just rooted in falsehoods about the particular history of Greenland. And there were all sorts of other falsehoods that littered the speech, including, his antipathy towards NATO, fueled as it is by his claim that before he became president, the United States was paying 100% of the costs for NATO. Flatly untrue. In its worst year, by Donald Trump's yardstick, the United States was paying 66% of NATO's costs, and he, of course, has addressed that, not in one presidential term, but in a second. But he sounds absolutely resolute about his determination to get his hands on Greenland. Remember that he's called today for immediate negotiations, not negotiations in his mind that are about finding an off-ramp or climbing down, negotiations about how the US can buy Greenland. And he's made it clear within the last hour that his preferred negotiator is not any of the Danish government figures that have roundly excoriated his speech today in Davos. His preferred negotiator is Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, who has vigorously defended Donald Trump in his own separate speech earlier today, and who, of course, famously called Donald Trump, to Donald Trump's eternal joy, Daddy. Mark Rutte is the guy that Daddy wants to negotiate the handover of Greenland, and our government and every other government is now going to have to wonder whether they can trust Mr. Rutte on his own to handle that kind of negotiation.
Well, the Danish government just won't wear that, will they? Nor should they.
I mean, it seems very unlikely, but when it was put to Donald Trump today by a reporter, as he was sitting alongside Mark Rutte, who, by the way, pushed back at Donald Trump's entirely false claim that NATO has never been there for the United States and won't be there for the United States, and in his usual very carefully worded explanation to President Trump, couched it all in the fact that this was evidence that the alliance has never been stronger than it is under Donald Trump's leadership. But when it was put to the president that the Danish government had completely rejected his call for these immediate talks to begin about the acquisition of Greenland, Trump said, well, I need to hear that to my face. I don't want to hear that secondhand. They need to come and say it to my face. And anyway, I'd much rather negotiate with him. And by him, he meant the man who had called him Daddy, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte.
Now, Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, he's made quite a spectacular speech today, warning that world trade rules are never going to be the same again. In fact, the world will never be the same again. Now, Donald Trump also had a go at Mark Carney. If his logic over Greenland is in any way correct, then surely he should be going after Canada as well. And that's what he threatened right at the beginning of his presidency, didn't he, when he wanted to make Canada the 51st state. Is Canada next on his list, do you think? Or is that too big a bite to have?
Well, I think Canada's certainly on the list. I mean, in Donald Trump's mind, he hasn't referenced the 51st state recently, but I'm sure it's still percolating away in the back of his mind. We heard on LBC earlier from Michael Ignatieff, former leader of the Liberal Party in Canada, that he believes the Northwest Passage is very much on Donald Trump's mind as something that he would like to acquire. And I think it's important that Mark Carney, in his appearances in Davos, has used the R word, rupture, measure to describe what is taking place in the transatlantic relationship and indeed in his bilateral relationship with the United States. But the other point worth making, Iain, is that Donald Trump insisted today that one of the reasons why the United States has to own Greenland is because you can't defend a place if you're only leasing it or if you're only renting it. You can't defend a place unless you own it. And that's going to come as a shock to the numerous countries around the world that have treaties with the United States that guarantee that the United States will defend them. Never mind NATO members. Think about South Korea, for example. Think about places like Japan. I mean, places where the United States is treaty bound to provide military assistance, to defend them. Well, the President of the United States is now saying, yeah, but if I don't own a place, I can't really be expected to defend it. I mean, take that logic to its natural conclusion, and vast areas of the world should be very nervous tonight about whether the United States has got their back, never mind whether NATO has got America's.
Simon, thank you as ever. That's Simon Marks, LBC's US correspondent. Professor David Dunn joins me now, Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham, who specialises in US foreign and security policy, which I imagine, David, is a pretty full-time job at the moment.
Believe me, it is. The scale and the pace of events is breathtaking. I've studied this for a long career, having started off as an intern in Washington back in 1987 under Ronald Reagan, and I've never seen anything like this. As I say, the tectonic plates are shifting fundamentally. This is huge. This is a major rupture, not only in trade policy and in security policy, but actually in the whole rules of the international system, to have the American president behaving in, frankly, this outrageous way, demanding, like some mafia boss, the ownership of Greenland, otherwise there'll be consequences. It really is extraordinary.
But he does have a track record of backing down on some of the more bellicose threats that he's issued. There seems to be a little bit of a pattern developing there. He's now saying he won't use military action to take Denmark, which, if you are sort of obsessed by the art of the deal, why would you take your biggest threat off the table at this stage?
Because it's outrageous, and because actually
we know that.
Yeah, but he probably also got pushback from his own military. But what Trump does is he goes maximalist. He goes the most outrageous thing he can think of, and then he rose back from that slightly by 5 or 10%, and then people have a memory of the ground position and think, well, okay, it's not as bad as it was, but it's still bad. It still fundamentally challenges all assumptions, and that can't be ignored. What we have is someone who is prepared to abandon international law to demand the transfer of a people, rather like they were chattels rather than actually individuals with their own wishes and rights and obligations for them to be heard on, and he's to present that as if it's normal, and he's comes across in his own image of himself as being moderate because he takes the use of force off the table. Really? Yeah, that's not a major concession when you're still demanding, under threats of economic violence or the rupture of NATO, the forcible transfer of sovereign territory. That's not reasonable.
What are the main dangers for the United Kingdom in this new world, as Mark Carney dubbed it earlier? I mean, somebody's joking, well, I assume it's a joke here, somebody's texted me to say, well, the Isle of Lewis could be next. Or
Shetland. I mean, if what applies for Greenland applies to Canada, as Simon said, also applies to Iceland, also applies to Shetland. If he's serious about the Arctic, which I don't think he is, I think it's primarily about ego. It's about actually, I mean, his White House on the walls with pictures of President Polk and President McKinley, people who expanded the territorial size of the United States. It's about ego. It's about narcissism. It's about legacy. But he wants those territories to actually expand the size of the United States. And that, to him, is more important than the integrity of international law, the wishes of the people of Greenland, the stability of the financial and trade system, and the whole basis of international law. This man is driven by self-aggrandizement, and that as a priority is a challenge. And the fact that his speech is littered with historical inaccuracies is also a problem, because what that demonstrates is that actually the State Department and any adults in the US government aren't able to get any access to it, because he surrounds himself with sycophants who are prepared to actually provide him with lies to buttress his outrageous position. And that again shows how broken American decision-making is, how broken American government is, and the fact that he elected him second time actually shows how broken American society is as well. So actually the main anchor of the international system for 80 years is fundamentally stuffed up.
To coin a phrase. David, thank you very much. That's Professor David Dunn there, Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham. Time for your calls next. Is Donald Trump the TACO president? And after he backed away from using the US military in both Iran and Greenland, is it time to stop taking Trump's threats so seriously? Or should we take them seriously but not literally? I mean, there is a difference there, isn't there? Looking forward to your views. 0345 6060 973. It's 7:17.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
They have fatal incompetence.
Straight to the point.
What is the problem they've got over there?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
The country's going backwards. Growth down. Energy prices up.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC.
When you
Dale on LBC.
19 minutes past 7 on LBC. John says, I heard what he had to say and I feel you're engaging in wishful thinking. And Trump sounded to me rather like he was doubling down rather than backing down. He said he wouldn't use excessive force. Well, he did say that, but he said he wouldn't use force at all, which surely means... I don't think he backed down on the principle of getting Greenland. I think you're right on that, John. But he did actually say, but I won't use force. So I don't really agree with you on that, if I may say so. Steve says, there's another way that Trump could take Greenland by taking it up on its offer to allow the United States to base forces there and then saying it's his. He just said that when they were there before, they shouldn't have given it back. It's not a question of giving it back. It was never his in the first place. Yes, during the Second World War, effectively it was occupied by America. But I've always thought in the end, the solution will be that Denmark will accede to his request to build more military bases and station more military personnel on the island of Greenland. But they could do that already. They don't actually need Denmark's further permission. As far as I know, they have that permission within the 1951 treaty with Denmark. If you know different, do let me know. 0345 6060 973. Let's go to Tom in Winchester. Hello, Tom.
Oh, hello, Ian. Thank you for taking the call. No, I just get slightly frustrated by this mantra of take him seriously but not literally. Trump's a negotiator. He puts out maximalist positions, and if you don't address them, if you don't front right back up to them, then guess what? He gets away. The Europeans, as Gavin Newsom pointed out, need to lose their knee pads. Carney has shown, with the elbows up approach, exactly how Trump's politics can be negated.
How has he done that? Because you could argue that his aggressive approach towards Trump, I mean, some would say confrontational, has not gained Canada anything in their relationship with America.
Other than their own identity, their own independence, and a future that is outside of the American sphere of influence, or at least partially outside.
I think you could also argue that Keir Starmer's approach up until this week, it's arguable whether that's changed now, but up until this week, you could argue that Starmer's approach of constructive engagement has won Britain more than the confrontational approach taken by Canada.
In terms of winning, and dealing with Trump, I've taken the comments of Scaramucci quite seriously on this. He has no respect for the people that bow to him. The people he respects are the people who stand up to him.
Which is like most strong authoritarian leaders, isn't it?
And he is a strong authoritarian leader. This is why Newsom's knee pad comments was so opposite.
I don't know if you saw Prime Minister's questions today. In fact, we might try and get a clip and play it to you later. But certainly one of the answers he gave to Kemi Badenoch, Starmer went far further in aggressive language towards Trump than he ever has done before. And I wonder whether that is signalling a change of approach from the Prime Minister and the British government.
I think it has to be. And not only did he go further in his words, but his tone was, I thought, exemplary.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways of being strong and appearing strong without trying to kneecap the other side, isn't there? And I thought, actually, to be fair to Keir Starmer, he trod that tightrope quite well at lunchtime.
Exactly. And there is nothing to be gained anymore in hoping that Trump will fall back into a neat little geopolitical box of, good behaviour and conformity. Again, going back to Carney, that is over.
How do you think the whole Greenland episode is going to end?
I think he's going to attack.
Well, that really would be a game changer, wouldn't it? I mean, it would prove Mark Carney right, I suppose, that would be possibly the most important military event from a NATO point of view since NATO was formed in 1949, and no one would have ever thought it would be the Americans that would have provoked that event.
Oh, nobody would have thought that. But if you look at some of the things that are happening, on the sides, what Trump's goal, and actually, I can't remember the chap who was on the breakfast show this morning. The point about asking, don't get into the conspiracy theories. Just ask, how could Trump do anything better in the Russian sphere of influence? He's doing everything that the Russians want at the moment. And what he said today was he wouldn't use excessive force.
No, I think he did say that, but in another part he did say, I won't use force. So that was the point that John was making in that earlier text, I think. But he said, I won't use force as well, separately, without the word excessive.
Yeah, and, how many times has he gone back on what he said?
Well, just another thing to bring into this so-called board of peace that he wants to create, which he wants Tony Blair to be part of. He wants Britain to stump up £1 billion to part finance it. When you look at the people that he's including in this so-called board of peace, it's got absolutely nothing to do with Gaza. This is meant to effectively supplant the United Nations Security Council. And not only has he invited Vladimir Putin to be on it, but also Lukashenko from Belarus. I mean, what on earth is the logic behind that?
Oh, it's simple. simple, Ian. He wants to be king of the world.
Can't we leave that to Boris Johnson?
Well, I think he would have been somewhat more charming.
It would have been difficult to be less charming, eh? Tom, thank you very much indeed. Dennis says, I think you just quoted Nigel Farage, Ian. Take Trump seriously, but not literally. Nigel Farage has said that. He's not the only one to have said that. And then Dennis says, is Nigel Farage the voice of reason in all this? Well, when you think, I couldn't believe my ears. I thought it might have been a piece of AI work yesterday or the day before when I heard Nigel Farage criticising Donald Trump over Greenland and saying that this will not stand, this is not the way to treat NATO allies, etc., etc. So Nigel Farage isn't swallowing the Kool-Aid on this one. I'm not sure who is, apart from Stephen Miller and members of Donald Trump's own administration. Right, let's go to John in Woodford. Hi, John.
Oh, hello. I'm celebrating tonight. I really loved Trump's speech. And if I can tell you why.
Feel free.
Because we've heard for the last months or so that Keir Starmer has done so many U-turns and Trump appears to have done the same. Now, look, I just think the whole thing, we're dealing with a man that's possibly entering into dementia, Alzheimer's. He just goes on, and he's a sad man. And thank God we're not going to take any notice of him. And it was good that Keir Starmer did not go to that meeting today, because that would have, I'm sure, Trump would have noticed that Keir Starmer was not in the audience. Don't you think so?
I have no idea. Personally, I think Keir Starmer probably should have gone, but.
No. What, to listen to that?
Well, I think most other European leaders are there.
No, come on. Why go and listen to an old man?
Well, because he's the president of the United States.
Oh, God's sake, why do you hang that on that? What does it matter if he's the president? He's a president, being voted in, but he's not. He's a fool.
He may be a fool, but he's also the president of the most powerful nation on earth. And if you don't think that we have to take him at least seriously, then, I mean, I don't know what you want to do.
Surely the most powerful states in the country at the moment, in the world, are obviously China. And Russia's, we really don't know what's going on there. You keep on about him being, he's blowing himself up. You're listening and taking it in. I really don't believe he is.
Well, I am listening because he's the president of the United States. And if we don't listen to what the president of the United States is saying, then I don't know what I'd be doing in this job, frankly, because it's part of my job to do that. I think it's anybody's job, whether you're in the media or not. If individual citizens don't take Trump seriously with a lot of what he says, a lot of what he thinks, how can we possibly seek to understand him?
Well, I told you, I'm just trying to tell you that we can't understand a man that's actually very slowly losing his mind.
Well, you're not a doctor. You've got no idea whether that's the case or not.
Oh, come on, the rambling. Come on.
Well, a lot of people ramble. Believe it or not, I've been known to ramble on a bit.
Yeah, but not as unintentionally as that.
Well, I'd hope not, but I'm sure there's been the odd occasion. I mean, we had all of this with Joe Biden. I mean, his decline was clear, I think, for everyone to see, and it was ignored by the American media. And I remember the first time I said on this programme that I thought Joe Biden was on the slide to dementia. And I really hesitated before saying it because it's not a nice thing to do to talk about people in those terms. But when they're the president of the United States, you're not doing your duty if you don't call it out. Now, I think there are signs that Donald Trump is sort of muddled sometimes. Like today, he thought Greenland was the same as Iceland. Well, that could just be geographical ignorance, not a sign of a mental decline.
He also said that there were no wind turbines, was it, or things in China. He went on about there was no sign of is it wind turbines or the other one? Oh God, I've forgotten what they are now.
I don't know what he said on that.
What he did, he went on about I was around there and never saw any wind turbines at all. But the Chinese are using wind turbines to collect power.
Well, they're manufacturing most of ours.
Look, have you ever been to a market and a man has told you to buy this item or that item and you stood there and he's been so electric, he can really get across to you and you end up buying it. But it's rubbish, isn't it? I was going to use the other word that you sometimes find in a field.
Possibly best that you didn't. Okay, John, thank you very much indeed. Let me tell you who's on Cross Question later at 8 o'clock. Victoria Atkins, Conservative Shadow Environment Secretary and MP for Louth and Horncastle. Rachel Maskell, the Labour MP for York Central. James Schneider, long-term advisor to Jeremy Corbyn and political author. And Tim Stanley, the columnist for the Daily Telegraph and host of the Daily Tea podcast. It's 7:30 on LBC. We'll come to more of your calls in a moment, and we'll also be hearing from Aggie Chambray about Nigel Farage's little local difficulty today on the expenses front. It's 7:31. Let's get the news headlines from Amelia Cox.
The European Union says it has suspended work on the implementation of its trade deal with the US, saying it is currently impossible. Donald Trump has ruled out the use of force to acquire Greenland at Davos, but has called for negotiations to be opened immediately. A woman has been convicted of modern slavery offences after holding a vulnerable woman against her will for more than 25 years. A court heard how Amanda Wixon's victim, who first came to live with her in Gloucestershire as a teenager, was repeatedly beaten and starved. And train drivers in Spain are going on strike for 3 days over safety concerns after 2 deadly accidents. At least 42 people were killed when 2 trains derailed on Sunday, and a driver died after a wall collapsed onto tracks near Barcelona yesterday. LBC weather, showers in the west tonight with patchy rain in the east, more continuous rain in northeast Scotland, lows of 3 degrees.
LBC. Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
Back to your calls on Trump in just a moment. It's 7:34 here on LBC. Nigel Farage has had quite a good couple of weeks in many ways, all these defections. But today, not so good. Aggie Chambray, our political correspondent, is here to tell us why.
Indeed. So Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader, has been found to have breached the MP's code of conduct not once, not twice, not even 3 times, but 17 different times, Ian, for failing to register financial interests worth £384,000 on time. That's an investigation that's been done by the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog. So effectively, the Reform UK leader didn't add payments to the register of members' financial interests within the required period of 28 days. So we are talking 6 payments from GB News, his other employee. So that those were all logged late, including one lump sum of £51,000. pounds 36 days after the deadline that one was reported. He's also got payments from a London-based gold dealer who he helped advertise, and from Cameo too, which is that site, where basically people pay for
Believe
you
it or
to
not,
send them
I'm
a
actually
video.
on it.
You're not?
I have.
Oh, goodness. Well, you're not an MP, so you don't have to register your payments.
I don't think I get as many requests as Nigel Farage does, though.
Well, we don't have that data in front of us, Ian, so
I can assure you I don't.
There's no way to prove. And it is worth noting that this does make him...
How much did you get from that, by the way?
So he got quite a lot of money, actually, from Cameo, thousands and thousands of pounds, £17,173, I assume.
I think in the whole of last year, I got about £250.
Still very impressive. But I think it is worth noting, because actually he is obviously earning a huge amount of money from Cameo, from GB News, from the gold-based dealer too, that he is one of the highest earners in Parliament. And that's actually led him to accusations from his opposition, who basically are accusing him of lining his pockets instead of serving his constituents. We have had a response from him, and he has written to the Commissioner. He said he accepts that he's breached this section of the code, takes full responsibility, and would like to say he is sincerely sorry. He's blaming his team, saying it was an administrative error on behalf of him and his team. But unlike most members, he says, I have a very complicated and complex set of interests, including my work as a TV presenter and a successful businessman. He says there's no malicious intent, and he would ensure that his team will meet the deadlines, and him would meet the deadlines, the declarations going forward.
Deputy heads must roll. And talking of deputies, I think I demoted you earlier. You are, of course, now a deputy political editor.
Think how much money I could make on Cameo.
Well, indeed. Now, some breaking news. Donald Trump's Greenland-related tariffs, due to come into force on Sunday next weekend, have been cancelled. Well, what a surprise that is to us all, given the subject of this hour. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Right, let's go to Nick, who is in Vancouver. Nick, are you sort of quaking in your boots, worrying about becoming an American 51st state in Canada?
No, they can't do it. They could capture us, but they couldn't hold us. The sheer size of Canada makes it impossible financially for them to do that. That's our size is our protection, basically. I did want to ring in and explain a little bit of what I understand of what Mark Carney's strategy is with Trump and why Canada is doing what it's doing. We've, as a country, obviously spent a lot of time dealing with the US and over the years. And the one thing that Canadians realize, and Canadian politicians, is that whatever deal you do with the Americans now, even if the Democrats say, Trump's terrible and they disagree with all of it, they will keep every advantage that Trump gets for them. So you really don't want to deal with Trump.
Sorry, Nick.
You want to wait him out. He's going to be powerless in about a year's time. He's going to lose the midterms. He's going to lose whatever negotiating power he has. So basically, you don't want to deal with him. You want to ignore him. You want to move on and wait until this period is over. Now, it may not end, but that's the best strategy. Canada knows it.
Well, he's not out of office until January 2029. It's a bit early to say that anything he says or does doesn't matter. I mean, I know any second-term president does become a lame duck at some stage, but I would suggest you're bringing that forward a bit unrealistically.
Well, no, it's not. It's not when he's out of office. It's when the House and the Senate change over. And he's going to lose comprehensively in a year's, or less than a year's time now. November is when he loses.
Well, you hope he does, but nobody knows that will actually happen. He may well lose the House, but I'm not sure whether the Senate will be in play as much as you seem to think.
He is killing his own chances. I mean, that's and the more you push back on him, the worse it gets for him politically. And that's basically why Carney's doing what he's doing. And it's also very good politically for Carney.
Well, is it? How well is that going down with the Canadian public, this stance?
Oh, it's hugely popular. Pierre Poilievre, who was sort of level pegging with Carney sort of up until the election. Carney is now up at 55% popularity, and Pierre Poilievre is down into the low 20s. It's killing the Conservatives here. Standing up to Trump is a great political ploy. Starmer should realize that. There's no good political outcome to looking weak to America. There really isn't.
Nick, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, that breaking news that I brought you has obviously meant that we need to have another little chat with Simon Marks. He's going to be on this programme tonight as often as he was last night, I think. So the news that these Greenland-related tariffs on various EU countries and Britain are now being cancelled, that was after, I think, he met with Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, in Davos. Simon, what else do you know?
Well, we're 1-1 on the programme tonight, Ian. You said that Trump always chickens out, and I said I wasn't sure that he does, but what I was sure of is that he wants Mark Rutte to be the point person in negotiations to acquire him Greenland. And we've had this message posted on President Trump's social media account confirming that he is chickening out of the tariffs, but also confirming that he wants Mark Rutte to help America get its hands on Greenland. He says he had a very productive meeting with the Secretary General of NATO. And remember, Mark Rutte is the man that has been deployed on numerous occasions by the alliance to try and talk Donald Trump down from various precipices. He's the man who has referred to Donald Trump in a joking manner as daddy. And Donald Trump has never forgotten it. He absolutely is enthused over that description of him and that reference to the role that he thinks he plays within NATO. Well, the president says, based on his conversations with Mark Rutte today, we have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region, whatever that means. And he says that if this solution is consummated, it will be a great one for the USA and all NATO nations. And based on those developments, he's decided he's scrapping the February the 1st 10% tariffs that were going to wreak fresh havoc for the economy of the UK and 7 of its fellow NATO members. He says that discussions are now going to be overseen on the American side by Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and various others as needed, and that they will be reporting directly to the President of the United States. But what is unspoken in all of this is how the Danes and the Greenlanders feel about this outcome, and whether the Danish government, which said today it has absolutely no interest in a conversation with the United States about handing over the ownership of Greenland to the United States, is going to play ball with this and with this effort by Mark Rutte to try and bring about some kind of solution. Plus questions, of course, for our own government, for the French, for the Germans. What kind of guarantees have they had from the NATO Secretary General that he's not going to sell Greenland down the river and make arrangements for the United States to acquire it? Because Donald Trump was absolutely clear in his speech in Davos today that acquisition is the name of the game. It's the only thing he will accept. You can't defend a territory unless you own it, he said today. So I think a raft of fresh questions now for European government officials about whether they have negotiated any kind of an agreement with Mark Rutte to take this issue forward with the Americans, and whether they have full confidence in his ability to defend the territorial integrity of Greenland and Denmark, or whether the fix is now in and Greenland is about to be sold down the river.
A terrible thought has just struck me, Simon, that you don't think that he's got Dutch and Dane mixed up, do you? Because obviously Mark Rutte is a Dutchman, and whether he might have confused the two things there.
No, I think it's unlikely, although I'm intrigued by this reference to a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. I wonder if that is an effort by the president to paper over the mistakes that he made in his speech today when he kept referring to Iceland instead of Greenland. The White House press secretary, I can tell you, is denying that he ever said Iceland, even though we all heard it multiple times. So there's obviously obviously some embarrassment about that. I think in Mark Rutte, he sees someone that he believes he can work with, because, Mark Rutte has applied a limitless amount of baby oil to Donald Trump over the course of the last 12 months. There is no official that has entered Donald Trump's White House and sat alongside him in the Oval Office more willing to massage the ego of America's president. That's the position in which Mark Rutte has placed himself, and now he's about to gamble his entire career and his reputation on whether he can reach some sort of compromise with Donald Trump over Greenland that does not involve ownership of the territory being transferred to the United States.
You mentioned a phrase earlier that I think Trump used on his Trump social platform, consummating a solution. I'm going to go to the break now, leaving that vision in everyone's mind. Simon Marks, thank you very much indeed. It's 7:46.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
Is Trump serious about wanting Greenland, or Iceland, as he now keeps calling it by mistake?
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
Big Motor.
Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
7:49. Earlier in the hour, I did promise to take you through what the Prime Minister said today when he was asked about Donald Trump's new public opposition to the deal to hand the Chagos Islands over to Mauritius.
President Trump deployed words on Chagos yesterday that were different to his previous words of welcome and support when I met him in the White House. He deployed those words yesterday for the express purpose of putting pressure on me and Britain in relation to my values and principles on the future of Greenland. Mr. Speaker, he wants me to yield on my position, and I'm not going to do so.
Now, meanwhile, Nigel Farage was not at Westminster today. Instead, he was also in Davos, where he said this about Trump's desire to take control of Greenland.
Would America owning Greenland be better for the world in terms of safety and stronger for NATO? It would. However, if you believe in Brexit, and if you believe in celebrating America's 250th birthday, if you believe in the nation state and not globalist structures, you believe in sovereignty.
And here's the same Nigel Farage speaking on the same issue only 2 days ago.
I'm worried about it. I'm concerned about it. I've always been a supporter of the president since way before he got elected first time. But I will be having some words with the American administration in Davos on Wednesday on this issue. It's wrong.
How times change in a couple of days. It's very odd, isn't it? So, because I had a text earlier on saying, well, Nigel Farage didn't criticise Donald Trump. In fact, he said that the world would be better off if America did take over Greenland. Well, those two clips there, I think, are quite contrasting, aren't they? We'll come back to your calls in a moment on Donald Trump changing his mind, shall we be kind and put it that way, rather than chickening out. But first, I want to just get a quick update from the High Court today, where Prince Harry has become a little bit emotional while giving evidence against the publisher of the Daily Mail in the court. Helen Hodinott joins us, LBC's reporter, who was at the High Court to hear the Duke of Sussex's evidence today. Helen.
Ian, if it feels a bit like Groundhog Day, it's because this is the third time that Prince Harry has taken the tabloids to court over privacy. He won his case against the Mirror in 2023. The Sun apologised to him and settled last year. But what'll happen over the next 9 weeks in his battle against the Daily Mail could leave him ultimately victorious or not. His hat-trick in this hangs in the balance. Today, he was called to give evidence, and it was a dramatic, emotional day in court, culminating in Prince Harry on the verge of tears in the stands, saying this case had been a horrible experience and that by not admitting fault, the Daily Mail has made his wife's life a misery. At the heart of this case are 14 articles that were published by the Mail in the early 2000s, which included extremely intimate details about his love life, plans and feelings, which he insists could only have been obtained using unlawful information gathering tactics. The publishers of the Mail, Associated Newspapers Limited, are accused of hiring private investigators to use methods like phone hacking and blagging, which is a so-called dark art which involves pretending to be someone else to get information like bank details and medical records. Now, the Daily Mail denies the allegations, calling them preposterous and accusing the claimants, along with Harry, of clutching at straws. But central to this case will be the paper having to try to explain in court how exactly its journalists got the information that went to print. In his questioning, the lawyer for the paper, Anthony White KC, suggested the journalists got the details from the prince's own friends, painting a cosy picture of the journalist attending the same polo matches, nightclubs and bars as Harry and his group went to, suggesting that they were the leak. Prince Harry denied that his friends were loose-lipped around known reporters. He said the prince and his friends were aware of who the reporters were, but didn't complain at the time about the work that they did, to which Harry replied that he would have been accused of being rude, reminding the court early in his evidence of the royal rule of never complain, never explain. Now, one of the examples Harry gave in his written statement was an article from 2006 about his and Prince William's reaction to the Italian media publishing a photograph of Princess Diana after her fatal crash. He said the Mail could only have known their reactions to that if they'd been listening in on their phone calls, again denied by the publisher. Finishing his evidence today, Prince Harry told the court his life has been open season to be commercialised, that it has been since he was a teenager, with every aspect of his personal life delved into, saying that having to sit in court and have the paper claim that he doesn't have any right to privacy is disgusting disgusting. So that is Harry's testimony done. It was emotional, sometimes tense, as he argued with the defence lawyer. You could tell how personal this was for him. And over the next couple of months of this trial, other high-profile claimants will take to the stand, including Liz Hurley, Sadie Frost and Sir Elton John. And as this is a civil case rather than criminal, what is at stake are potentially big payouts and, of course, a enormous settling of the score.
Helen, thank you very much. That's Helen Hodden up there, LBC's reporter outside the High Court. Now, let's continue with our discussion about whether Donald Trump is a TACO president. That stands for Trump Always Chickens Out. Well, we couldn't have timed this discussion better, could we? Because he has chickened out of imposing tariffs on Britain and other EU countries for their stance on the Greenland issue. That news has broken in the last 15 minutes. Text here says Donald Trump is either all bluster or all bite. Credit to Starmer for standing up to him while keeping the special relationship afloat. Another one here, this is from Steve, who says there's another way that Trump could take Greenland, by taking it up on its offer to allow the United States to base forces there and then saying it's his. I think did I read this one out earlier? He just said that they were there before they shouldn't have given it back. Well, I mean, that is historically completely inaccurate, it has to be said. Let's go to Mark, who is in Woking. Hello, Mark.
Hello. My wife nudged me in this direction. Trump says that he loves the Bible. When asked which part, he said all of it. So I think that Trump will be very familiar with 1 Kings 21, and the story of Naboth and his vineyard.
I'm sure we all are.
I'll run through it quickly.
Please do.
There was a very powerful king called Ahab. He was married to Jezebel, whose name you might find familiar.
Oh, I know a lot of Jezebels.
He had a neighbour called Naboth who owned a vineyard, and Ahab said, I want your vineyard. I will buy it off you. And Naboth said, no, I'm not going to sell it. So he said, I'll swap it for a better piece of land. And Naboth said, no, it belonged to my father, and I want to pass it on to my son. So what did Ahab do? He had him murdered. No doubt to say, Ahab came to a sticky end because God said his actions were evil. And that is all I've got to say.
You're not suggesting that Donald Trump is about to murder the Prime Minister of Denmark, are you?
I'm suggesting that he wants something, and he seems to be very bellicose, is that the right word, about getting hold of what he wants.
Well, he is being bellicose. I mean, he's got a track record of... I mean, he's not the only world leader to be bellicose, it has to be said, but he is the only one that I can remember who seems to go about it in such a blunderbuss way, threatens the earth, and then sort of backs down on the threats most of the time.
I hope he backs down, because I think he's totally out of order.
OK. Thank you very much, Mark. Ben in Brighton says, every night, people start their text with, I know you won't read this out, Ian. Well, I do read things out that don't agree with the stance that I'm taking, Ben, as you well know. Anyway, you won't read this out because the truth would flatten your entire life belief system. I wouldn't bet on it. But imagine the global strength the UK could project if Thatcher hadn't sold, I knew she'd have to come into it, hadn't sold off our oil, gas, manufacturing, water, electricity, telecommunications, and perhaps even sovereignty to vast investment funds. Well, how did she sell off our sovereignty when she went to a war to retain British sovereignty over the Falkland Islands? She didn't sell off British manufacturing. We're still the 9th biggest manufacturing country in the world. I guess you didn't know that. Anyway, Ben continues, we previously had real power, but are now almost irrelevant. This country was once a global force, but it's now a side dish for Trump to laugh at. You can't acknowledge this, but she ruined my country. No, I don't acknowledge it at all. In fact, I think quite the opposite. We don't own the oil and gas in the North Sea. We sold it for reduced tax. Simple, unthinking, short-sighted and destructive policy. Well, we're all entitled to our point of view, aren't we, Ben? Just a shame that yours is completely wrong. Coming up in the next hour, it is Cross Question, and on the panel tonight, Victoria Atkins, Conservative Shadow Environment Secretary and MP for Louth and Horncastle, Rachel Maskell, Labour MP for York Central, James Schneider, long-time advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, who worked with him during his time as Labour leader and also during the founding of your party. It's going well. Tim Stanley, columnist for the Daily Telegraph. They're here to answer your questions, and of course, if you're not already watching us on Global Player, the LBC app or the LBC YouTube channel, you can switch one of them on or all of them on right now and watch the next couple of hours of the show here on LBC.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, Donald Trump says he now won't impose tariffs on countries that stop him from taking control of Greenland. In a post on social media, he says he's formed a framework for a future deal. Here's LBC's Washington correspondent Simon Marks.
We've had this message posted on President Trump's social media account confirming that he is chickening out of the tariffs, but also confirming that he wants Mark Rutte to help America get its hands on Greenland. He says he had a very productive meeting with the Secretary General of NATO.
Well, earlier Donald Trump ruled out the use of force to acquire Greenland while addressing world leaders in Davos. He also complained that the US has never gotten anything out of NATO and told the summit he loves Europe but believes it's going in the wrong direction. A mother of 10 has been found guilty of forcing a teenage girl to work as a house slave in Gloucestershire for 25 years. A court heard 56-year-old Amanda Wixon regularly beat the victim and starved her. Prince Harry came close to tears in court earlier after claiming the Daily Mail made his wife's life an absolute misery. He's one of 7 accusing associated newspapers of unlawful information gathering, something it denies. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 11 points at 10,138. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.14. LBC weather, showers in the west tonight, more rain in northeast Scotland, a low of 3 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. 2 minutes past 8 is the time here on LBC. Welcome to Wednesday's Cross Question. Don't forget, we have a Thursday Cross Question nowadays as well, so don't forget to tune in for that. Tomorrow, on the panel with me, to my left, Victoria Atkins, Conservative Shadow Environment Secretary and MP for Louth and Horncastle. Next to her, James Schneider, political commentator and author. To my right, Rachel Maskell, the Labour MP for York Central. And to her right, Tim Stanley, columnist for the Daily Telegraph. They're all here to answer your questions. The number to call 0345 6060 973. And we hope you're watching us on the LBC YouTube channel, Global Player or the LBC app.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
Right, let's go to our first caller. It is Chris in Richmond. Hi, Chris.
Evening, Ian. Evening, panel. Was Keir Starmer right today to accuse Kevin Badenoch of political opportunism by talking about the Chagos Islands in the wake of Donald Trump's actions around Greenland?
Well, now the Prime Minister's claimed that Trump has only turned against the Chagos Islands deal with Mauritius because the US President is using it to try to pressure Starmer to back him over Greenland. Victoria Atkins.
No. And the reason being that these are just 2 instances of the very grave national security issues we face around the world. We, as Conservatives, have fought this plan to sell off Chagos and to pay £35 billion for the pleasure, with all of the national security implications that there are because of the siting of those islands and the equipment and hardware that is on them.
Why did your government enter into talks over this then?
And so it is, well, I'll deal with that in a moment, but it is quite right for Kemi to have raised this because we've been raising this for the last year. In terms of the negotiations, there is a whole lot of difference between having a conversation and then actually striking a deal. And what is difficult for the Prime Minister is that having agreed to this deal, which has had many, many criticisms levelled at it. Only last year, the Deputy Prime Minister said that this deal was contingent on the United States supporting it. Yesterday, President Trump said he thought it was an act of great stupidity. And so when the Prime Minister stood today at Prime Minister's Questions and defended the Chagos deal, surrender deal, he was of course going against the very policy that Labour has set itself for this decision.
But this wasn't just a conversation that happened under a Conservative government. It was a series of conversations. It didn't result in any sort of agreement. You're absolutely right on that.
Stopped.
But the fact is, they were clearly happy to consider doing something because they knew that the international courts were very sceptical over the legality of our ownership of the Chagos Islands. But, I mean, Kemi Badenoch she's had a good series of PMQs today, but she didn't really have a great day today, did she?
I don't agree with that either, but I do think on this issue of Chagos, we have been opposing this since this became clear. As I say, it is extraordinary that this government is going to be paying £35 billion for this surrender deal. Imagine how much difference that £35 billion could have if we instead invested it in defence spending, which is one of the concerns that President Trump understandably has about the security in the EU at the moment. Instead, they are prioritising spending money on that when we have very grave concerns, as indeed now does the US.
James Schneider.
The great irony about the Chagos deal is that it was done explicitly for the United States. The US has an enormous military base there, Diego Garcia, which is why Britain committed crimes against humanity by clearing out the Chagosians from the atoll, from their homeland, deporting them en masse and killing their pets so that the US could have that military base. The International Court of Justice, the world's highest court, ruled that Chagos had been part of an incomplete decolonization. And in order to protect the US base from legal problems, Britain entered into the negotiations and has now done the deal, which secures the base, not for us, for the United States, at great cost to ourselves. What should have been done... How
is that a good deal, though, if we're having to pay for it?
I'm not saying it's a good deal. What should have been done is giving back Diego Garcia and all of the Chagos Islands to the Chagosians and paying them reparations for the fact that they had enormous crimes against humanity done to them. The military base, I don't think, should be there. I don't think it serves our interests. I don't think it serves the world interest that there is this military base that, for example, was involved in the bombing of Iraq. And it is part of the architecture of the US military might, which, as we can see right now with President Donald Trump, but we've seen with every single president beforehand, is out to dominate the rest of the world. Now, I don't think that has been good for us before, and I don't think it's good for us now.
OK. Tim Stanley?
I think Kemi was right to make a link between Chagos and Greenland because the Prime Minister says, I will not yield, and he will not yield on the point
John Major back.
They all sound the same, these people. He will not yield on the question of national sovereignty and the right of people to determine their own future, which is correct. But on the question of Chagos, not only has he yielded on that point, but he's actually bankrolled it. And I think that's where the contradiction lies. Also, in his comedy set at Davos, Donald Trump made the point that no one's willing to fight and die for a lease. So he doesn't want to just lease Greenland, he wants to own it. Oh, well, a similar argument could be argued with regards to the security of Diego Garcia, if it does matter. I mean, I don't personally care about it. It sounds to me like a hunk on a Latino soap. But if we are going to run to the defense of the honor of Diego Garcia, then the point is a fair point to say, why allow the Mauritians effectively legal ownership over it? Why not just say it is ours? That's how real power works. I find it so funny that we are essentially excavating old empires here. What is the battle over Greenland but a real estate fight between an old empire and a new one?
Rachel.
Well, defence is fast-moving, and I think we have to look at where the defence lies in the future. Let's first of all be clear on the amount of money this is costing. It's a 99-year lease, which is currently at 3.4 billion, not the amount others have quoted. But what we have got to say, first of all...
There's a bit of a difference between what Victoria was saying.
It certainly is a difference. First of all,
you both can't be right.
Well, this is the real terms today of what the value of that is. And what's really important... Ultimately, this island should belong to the Chagosians, and they have not been at the centre of the negotiations, and they absolutely should have. There will be the opportunity for them to return to some of the islands and also preservation of the blue space around that, which, of course, is welcome. But what I would say further, in the light that we are seeing a real global shift around what's happening around warfare, we're obviously deeply concerned about the way that this is getting, I would say, weaponised by AI and the drive that is taking, and also the dangers of using more drone and remote technology. You've got to ask whether or not this airbase is absolutely going to be necessary to that infrastructure in a decade, let alone in 99 years' time. So I think putting that long deal in place, what I would say is the negotiations have got to start about how do we see that reparation back to the Chagosians.
But forgive me, the point of Diego Garcia is it allows the West to project into South China Seas. It's somewhere close-ish to the next big competitor for us, which is China. And this is Trump's point about Greenland. We Europeans, are going around giving things up. And he's saying, I can't rely on you to defend the West anymore. Never mind, is he going to defend the West? He can't rely on us because we appear to be handing things over.
But we can't rely on him either.
Well, no, he's saying, let me do it. He's saying, let me buy this place and I'll turn it into my golden dome or whatever. But his central point, it does seem to be rather validated by Chagos, that Europe just seems determined to follow international law, which America routinely ignores, just follow international law and give up its own security at a time when the alternative is going to be China going in there instead, because it's quite friendly with the Mauritius government.
Well, that latter part absolutely is true. But when you've got a 99-year lease, and the Americans would therefore have that base for 99 years, it doesn't really work.
That's shorter than the freehold on my house. So that's not 99 years is not long in the history of civilizations. China thinks in terms of millennia. They're waiting to move in, and they will. You don't fight and die for something you don't own. We should have kept it.
And we've seen another act of conciliation to China this week with the government's approval of the Chinese
Donald Trump doesn't seem to have noticed
embassy, or dare we call it super spy base, right in the heart of the City of London. Parts of the plan have been redacted and given to whichever minister it was that made the decision. I suspect it was the Prime Minister, given the status that this has. And those plans have been redacted. Well, what on earth is China, of all countries, what are they doing in that embassy? And again, this is a decision where Keir Starmer may be looking to the end of the week in terms of controlling his parliamentary party. This single decision, along with Chagos, is going to be felt by our children, our grandchildren, and generations to come. And the damage to Chinese people who have fled this awful regime for human rights abuses. For them, they've had terrible trouble here in the United Kingdom, and now we have just said as a country, oh, it's fine, we'll fling open the Royal Mint to the Chinese.
But 10 years ago, Victoria, if we can go back in time, you may well have been sitting here saying, well, we're in a golden age of British-Chinese relationships, because David Cameron and George Osborne were absolutely wanting better relations with China.
And doesn't it show that is a very good lesson in how we always must act in the British national interest? And this is why Kemi has been talking about Chagos today at PMQs as well as Greenland, because actually we see the world politics moving at such a fast pace nowadays that we have to be, the government that looking after our country has to be absolutely focused on the British national interest. And I don't think that is happening at the moment.
What you're saying is, it relates to a phone-in I think we did on Monday, or was it last Thursday, where we asked our audience the question, does Britain need to take a leaf out of the Trump playbook? And I won't say have a Britain first policy, because that has unfortunate connotations, but a UK first policy, and become much more muscular in our foreign policy rather than appearing to be just, as you were saying, Tim, a little bit supine.
We should have a foreign and defence policy which is in the interests of the people of this country. In the current setup, where we are dominated by the US, where we operate essentially as a vassal, where we do not have an independent foreign policy, we do not have independent security, and we pay a vast amount of money into not our own economy, but into the US-American military-industrial complex, is not in our interest. So we should have a policy which is the interest of British people. Now, what does America First mean? America First doesn't actually mean in the interest of ordinary US American people. It means in the interest of the balance sheets of the biggest corporations who fund, or let's say the truth, buy politics, and they get the policies that they want for it. The military-industrial complex benefits from Trump forcing NATO states to increase military spending, including enormous amounts of waste. Most of that procurement goes to the US. If you look at European military imports, including the UK, from 2020 to 2024, they went up 155%, with almost 2/3 of those imports coming from the US. At the moment, we don't have a policy remotely that supports the interests of British people.
Rachel?
Well, let's look at Davos again. And what I would say is not only the speech of the week, but the speech of the decade, Mark Carney. And he was setting out the alternative vision of foreign policy, very much saying...
Shame our Prime Minister wasn't there doing the same.
Well, Mark Carney spoke for us all, and I think the reality is he put a different alternative stake in the ground. And, this isn't, I think, something to mock politically. I think it is something for us all to have regard for, because ultimately he was recognising the strength of what he was saying in the Middle States, recognising that the world order is changing and how we have got to get a hold of our own strengths, our own principles, and to set out the alternative policy. This isn't about following Trump as the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition did today. This is about setting out an alternative vision of what that geopolitical landscape is going to be, and then putting the investments in the right place, recognising the strength of what he's calling the Middle States, the alternative economies, about the values and the principles, and putting them front and forward and being proud of those and saying, come to our table, we're not coming to yours anymore. And I think it changed the geopolitics of the world today. And I have to say, I think that speech will go down in history as one of the biggest and most important speeches that has been made for a significant amount of time.
May I just correct you, Rachel, on that? Kemi was very clear today that Greenland is a part of Denmark, which is a NATO ally, and we stand with them. She went as far as to say she agrees with the Prime Minister on his stance on Greenland, that they have to have the right to self-determination, and we stand with them. Where she parts company, however, with Keir Starmer, is that we have to have a foreign policy and a defence policy that is in the British national interest. So, for example, when President Trump challenges Europe and says, you need to start looking after yourselves, you cannot keep relying on America to defend yourselves, actually there is truth in that. We all know that defence spending has to increase in this Parliament. We want to see it go to 3% in this Parliament. Keir Starmer has prioritised higher welfare spending over defence spending and has only said he would try and achieve that by 2034. Well, my goodness me, an awful lot can happen in the next years.
Final word on this goes to a texter. Tim Stanley is the first right-wing comedian I found funny, says Will. My friend Jeff Norcott will be bereft at
All
that.
right-wing people are a joke.
17 minutes past 8.
We know that.
This is LBC. Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
90 minutes past 8, we have Conservative Shadow Environment Secretary Victoria Atkins here. Is it lonely round that Shadow Cabinet table without Mr Jenrick?
No, it's wonderful to have Nick Timothy as our Shadow Lord Chancellor. And he had a very, very important success recently with bringing to light the trouble with West Midlands Police and the rather infamous football match. So I'm looking forward to Nick getting the next U-turn from the government, which will be over jury trials.
You reckon? Well, we'll soon see. I'm sure, Rachel, is that one of the issues that you're rebelling on?
Well,
if I may put it that way.
But when we see Leveson 2, I think that will have the answer to the justice system.
And that's the voice of Rachel Muscular, Labour MP for York Central. Tim Stanley is here, columnist for the Daily Telegraph and co-host of the Daily Tea podcast. You are now with Camilla Tominey.
That's right.
Doing that.
Yes,
Do you like podcasting?
I love it, but I just let her talk, and I'd throw in the odd joke. It's like Johnny Carson, and who was it? He was his sidekick.
Oh, Mr. Ed.
That's it. I'm Ed.
Mr.
I'm
Ed.
Ed to her Johnny Carson.
Right. Okay. And James Schneider is here, long-term advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, author. What was your last book called? I can't remember.
It's called Our Block: How We Win. We haven't won yet, but there's time. There's time. The struggle is long.
Right. Let's go to a text question from Izzy in Birmingham. Does Trump claiming he's got some sort of Greenland deal with the NATO boss, which means he doesn't need his tariffs threat anymore, show he's a genius, or that his threats can just be ignored? Now, in the last couple of minutes, Trump has told reporters it's a long-term deal. So I won't do that again. And an infinite deal.
It's beautiful.
See, Corey can do a brilliant Trump impression. I'm tempted to invite him into the studio, but he'll probably refuse. And an infinite deal, but has not made clear whether this new deal actually gives America ownership of Greenland. Tim Stanley.
You should take him seriously under certain circumstances. So Maduro probably should have taken him more seriously. And then Trump's actions at the beginning of the new year now look like he was trying to send a message to the rest of the world and set the tone for his diplomacy in the coming year. Trump's whole philosophy, it's all there in the art of the deal, is you ask for everything and then you take what you can get. So he has asked for everything, and we will wait and see what it is that he has got back. But there is some method. There is some method in the madness. And there's a bit of madness in the method too. I mean, I watched that speech and it was extraordinary. He was like a stand-up comedian dealing with hecklers, picking people out of the audience and taking the mick out of them. Emmanuel Macron with the aviator glasses, asking, "What the hell happened?" We know what happened. Bridget thumped him. Come on, we all know it.
No, there is precedent for Bridget taking legal action.
Oh my gosh, she's a beautiful woman with a very strong right hook, but I'm not saying she did that. No, so there was something.
Sure that improved it.
The way that he played that audience, I thought, was just great. But of course, he is America, so you have to take whatever he says seriously. And European leaders can relax for a couple of weeks, but he's been threatening and applying and then rescinding tariffs for the past 12 months. So I just don't think this is ever going to end. This is life now.
Well, for the next 3 years.
The series of managed crises created by this man. But it's so that he disrupts what he regards as a system that's not working in America's favour, and we can argue about whether he's right or not. But if he gets what he wants, then he's, by definition, right.
Tessa Acton says, Nick Abbott is the only LBC presenter that can do a genuine Trump impression. Please don't do it again, Ian. I promise I won't. Rachel.
Well, I think you're right. He is a disruptor, but also he is stamping his feet, but then having to backtrack. So every single time he marches people up to the top of the hill, freezes, literally, and then has to take a sidestep. And I think the bigger question is about how do we play the world order today to ensure that we do protect the international laws that need to keep our globe safe, and to ensure that he understands what those rules are. And I think slowly he is starting to realise that he can't set all of the rules, that actually there is a coalition of world leaders which will uphold international law, and that strength of the unity which that is bringing, of which Britain is a part, and I think we've seen the unity across the House on that, is to ensure that we have got the national security that we need, but also starting to push back on some of that global security that we need to also see. So I think yes, he is going to keep firing these shots, but he will learn that actually the resilience of the rest of the world will push back against him. So he can't have his way. He can't walk into other countries. And I do think on the issue of Venezuela, the UK could have been a lot stronger on that and condemning those actions and saying that international law holds as much for Venezuela.
Try telling that to a Venezuelan.
Well, that wasn't about, obviously, the leader himself, but it is about the international rule of law. And that is what we're talking about here. We've got to ensure that we don't pick and choose which laws we apply to which situation. We need consistency in the way that the global order is working. It is the inconsistency which is causing the instability.
But forgive me, Rachel, I don't think the West has stood up to him. To go back to what you were saying before the break about Mark Carney and his argument that the middle nations must come together and club together and stand up for what they believe in, I don't see, we have no evidence yet that that's what's happened. It's more likely that they have come to him and said, what do you want? And they've given it to him. Countries that do try and stand up to him, he just blows up. And one reason why we can't stand up to him is because Europe doesn't think like a polity. We don't have a united defence. We are not a separate bloc, and European leaders are not willing to cut spending on things like welfare to spend it instead on defence. I'm not sure they should, but so long as they're not willing to do it, they're not willing to pay the price of being a third power, we're never going to stand up to him or to China.
The thing is, I think what came out of Mark Carney's speech was not about just building our defence walls, but using our diplomacy walls as well, and being able to push those further forward, and therefore putting all of the eggs in the basket of defence isn't a way of trying to address those other issues, which we know the other two pillars of diplomacy and, of course, development, about building the stability that we need.
But forgive me, sorry, one lever we have is tariffs, and the Prime Minister did not apply them. I just don't see where Britain has, during this entire debate, stood up to Donald Trump in any way.
Well, we're not seeing the application of tariffs, are we? So he has been able to push back, not in a conventional way, but ultimately Trump has dropped the threats that he had. And that's where I think the weakness is in Trump's strategy.
But Starmer did strike a very different tone at Prime Minister's questions today. In his rhetoric against Donald Trump, it was much more trenchant than I've seen him do before.
He would not yield. OK, so what does that mean he will do? You don't just say, I will not give in. You have to explain, therefore, how will you escalate? And this is my point. Non-American Western powers have no power of escalation because we don't have independent defence and we're not as economically powerful.
James?
Well, the EU is looking at applying its anti-coercion instrument, which is this new thing which was originally developed for China and Russia, came into law in 2023, but applying it to the US, which is basically a huge raft of, they call it the bazooka in weird Brussels speak, but a huge raft of countermeasures that would hurt US capital, basically. And we, of course, haven't looked at doing any of those things. A huge bulk of the London Stock Exchange is owned by US companies. Of course, we haven't looked at anything like that. And I agree with Tim up to a point that other powers, basically, other than China and Russia, no one has properly stood up to Trump. We don't know what is remotely in this deal. And when Trump did brazenly breached the UN Charter by bombing Venezuela and kidnapping its president, all we got was absolutely epic, historic levels of monitoring the situation from European leaders, Canada, Australia, Britain, New Zealand, and these other sort of countries that are structurally vassals, and we have to break out of that. Now, that's not going to be easy. It's going to be extremely difficult, and it is going to involve coming together with perhaps middle countries and also ones from outside of our existing bloc, with Mexico, with Malaysia, with South Africa, with Brazil, with other states that can begin to create a different global architecture, because the one that we've got now has loads of flaws anyway and is being totally trashed by Trump, as it has been by previous US presidents.
Kemi Badenoch has just before we come to you, Victoria, Kemi Badenoch has just tweeted, "I welcome the news that President Trump has dropped his threat of tariffs for now. This will be a relief to businesses who are already facing so many challenges. It's also good to hear Trump rule out the use of force in Greenland. Greenland's future must be determined by its people." No reaction from the Prime Minister yet.
Well, the Prime Minister is missing in action. Why is it that so far today we've been talking about what is happening happening in Davos? Speeches by Mark Carney from Canada. We've seen President Macron in his aviators managing to make an eye infection look stylish. Why is it they're all there and our usually never hear Keir is in fact
which
not
do you
there?
want? You criticise him for going abroad.
If he was there, Victoria, you'd be saying, why isn't he here dealing with the flooding in Middlesex?
No. On this occasion...
flooding in Middlesex?
I don't know, but that's the sort of thing they would say. Also, you can't say, why hasn't he commented yet? It happened 28 minutes ago. So give the bloke a chance to write a proper response, not just tweet something out.
So the Davos where the President of the United States attends at this time in our world history. Last year he was not there. That is a critical time when there are threats from our strongest ally towards another NATO ally. He absolutely should be in the room speaking to the president.
But if he wasn't going to get any FaceTime with Trump, what would be the point?
Also, maybe he is speaking to him. We don't know what his diary is. Maybe he did have a call with him. Maybe there is a meet. I mean, who knows?
Well, we didn't get any answers in Prime Minister's questions today, did we? We had this change, as Iain has described in Prime Minister's questions, of tone. This is such a delicate and sensitive relationship that I'm genuinely astonished that the Prime Minister was not there today. In a way that he was able, he managed to find time in his busy diary to go to COP a couple of months ago. Very important, don't get me wrong, but is it as critically important to our national security today, next week, in the next year? I think there's a question to be asked there. And so we have to ensure that our Prime Minister is there in the room speaking to President Trump, trying to make sure that, as has happened, President Trump moves away from his position on tariffs and other actions. But we have to have a Prime Minister that is actually representing us at the times where it genuinely matters.
OK. Haven't seen any sign of the German Chancellor there today. Maybe he was there.
He did a very cringe social media video of him helicoptering in, saying, I'm arriving in Davos. You're like, oh, man, read the room.
How very German. It's 8:31 on LBC. Daryl Jackson has the news headlines.
The US President Donald Trump says he won't impose tariffs on countries that stop him from taking control of Greenland. He says he's formed a framework for a future deal with respect to the territory. Earlier he said he needed it but wouldn't use force to take control. A woman who held a vulnerable person against their will for more than 2 decades has been found guilty of modern slavery offences. A court heard how Amanda Wixon repeatedly assaulted her victim and forced her to clean and care for her children. An emotional Prince Harry's told the High Court the press made his wife's life a misery. He's been giving evidence as part of a legal battle against the Daily Mail's publisher, which denies unlawful information gathering. LBC weather: showers in the west tonight, more rain in the northeast of Scotland, a low of 3 degrees.
This is LBC.
This is
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
8:34 on LBC. We have with us in the studio Rachel Muscular, Labour MP for York Central, James Schneider, author and commentator, Tim Stanley, columnist for the Daily Telegraph and podcast for the Daily Tea, and Victoria Atkins, Conservative Shadow Environment Secretary, MP for Louth and Horncastle. Right, Ben in Nottinghamshire says, does the panel agree the future is TOWIE? The only way is Europe.
Oh, gosh.
James.
Images that came into my mind.
Well, indeed. James.
Not only Europe, I think we do need, along the lines that Rachel was saying beforehand, we need to put ourselves in a different place in the world. And part of that is going to be Europe, both economically and in terms of security and defence cooperation. But I don't think it can be only Europe. And that's not only because if you look at how the European Union is currently run and who's in its current leadership, it's pretty bad and not really along the lines of what we would like to be doing. But also the world is changing quite dramatically. And I think we should also be looking very much at our relationship with lots of other countries in the global south. I think we should have a sensible relationship with China. I think we should have a new relationship with countries like Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, South Africa, Malaysia. These are rising countries for the 21st century. And I think both in our geo-economic, our geopolitical and our defence of international law should be based on a new set of alliances there.
Victoria?
There's much actually in what James just said that I agree with. I think there's a big old world out there, and whilst of course we want to have good working relations with Europe, we do also need and want to have a good, strong relationship with the United States. We want to expand our business and diplomatic networks in other parts of the world. Some of the businesses that you see thriving in Singapore and that region, that's really exciting. So I'm afraid I come back to Britain's national interest. Is it in our national interest to expand our friendships and our trading relationships around the world? Of course it is. We shouldn't just confine ourselves to Europe, but equally we should try and get on.
But do you think we are entering a world now where we are going to, if Europe wants to have an influence as a bloc, there has got to be much more political unity? Now, Britain, we came out of the European Union. I've always taken the view we've either got to be fully out or fully in. Yeah. There isn't any halfway house. And yet, at the moment, I think a lot of people think, well, there is a halfway house.
No, I don't think there is. And this year is going to be particularly interesting with the EU reset, as the Prime Minister discovers the many problems that will be put in his way with, for example, the negotiations about food and environmental regulations. I think we as Conservatives, we want, of course, to have a friendly relationship with our nearest neighbours, but we don't believe that we should need to be in a political tie or union with them, and we need to be looking beyond that because, as I say, the volatility in the world that we are seeing at the moment means that we have to put effort into every single relationship. We cannot just focus on the EU.
Tim?
A few Remainers have the fantasy that we're going to go back into the EU now. If we tried, given that we've only just left, we'd be returning as a supplicant, so we'd get rolled over. Yeah. But also, the Prime Minister, although he would like closer alignment, recognises that in economic and trade terms, our future is American, not European. So, for instance, on AI regulation, which Britain hopes to use for growth, the American approach is deregulation. The European approach is over-regulation. So Britain wants to be doing a trade deal with America, and if it rejoined the EU, it would undermine that deal. The other problem Europe has is that it doesn't think as a polity. We keep talking about European interests and European attitudes. I'm not quite sure what they are. I mean, maybe on the continent they feel a civilizational bond more strongly than we do here, but I'm not quite sure what these values are that we are fighting for. And that's shown in how Europe itself is in transition. There is the Europe of liberals like Emmanuel Macron, but there's also the Europe of Viktor Orban in Hungary, or the Europe of Meloni in Italy. It's very hard to imagine this continent coming together. In about 10, 20 years' time, I think it will be more civilizational, dare I say more ethnic in its attitude, as its policies on things like immigration show. I will do a quick call out for those of us who are hobbits and want nothing to do with the rest of the world. I'm very, very happy for it all to go away, and I favour a foreign policy where we do as little as possible, certainly no more military stuff. Let's just be friends with people who want to be friends with us, but keep the world at a safe distance.
Rachel?
Back to reality. I think we've got to look at the kind of the dynamism that we need in our political alliances across the world. If we think the main challenges we're facing are coming from the global south, whether that's instigated by the climate challenges or indeed economic challenges. And I think we cannot operate just within the confines of Europe. Yes, greater synergy, of course, important. And I disagree on the issue of regulation. I think when we're coming to the world of AI, it's like we either control it or it will control us. But I think when we look further afield, if we are going to build stability on our planet, we've absolutely got to reach out to the global south and to look at how we partner with those countries, because many of the challenges they're facing are coming to our shores too, and we can't operate in this isolationism. We've got to engage with that leadership to look about issues around migration, issues around obviously the economic dynamic, as well as, of course, the kind of issues around global security. So I do think it's really important that we look at, first of all, that value base that we want to rebuild to stabilise the economic and the geopolitical order, and then how we move forward. But I think with all of this, what it will do is ask the big questions of China, Russia, and the United States about where they sit in a new order, as opposed to jumping to their stake, which is what's been happening for too long.
Right, some breaking news. The House of Lords just voted in favour of a ban on under-16s using social media, amending government plans for a wider law to protect children and young people. Now, the government, I think it was yesterday, issued a white paper on this, or a 3-month consultation period. So the House of Lords have, well, you could say jumped the gun in some ways in this, but to the government defeat in the House of Lords. Right, let's have...
and that was a policy that Kemi announced, and the government hasn't really caught up.
We're going to come. We will come to it after the break. But let's just quickly take this call from Martin in Doncaster. Hello, Martin.
Hi, Iain and panel. My question is what's the point of MPs having rules when Nigel Farage can breach them on 17 occasions for not declaring nearly £400,000?
Well, he has declared it, but done it very late. Now, the Reform UK leader has apologised for breaching the MP's Code of Conduct 17 times over failing to declare other earnings on time, namely his TV show and speaking engagements for a company in the US. But he says the lateness is caused by him not being very good with using computers and needing someone else to register these other earnings for him. Well, let's put this to the two MPs on the panel. I don't know what your outside interests are, but you presumably know the rules. I mean, to err once is unfortunate. To err 17 times, Rachel, might be considered, well, I don't know. I don't want to put words into your mouth.
Well, every MP knows that it's their responsibility to properly record their register of interests. I think people can access those registers and to scrutinise to see those interests, but not to record it is his responsibility. I think to put the blame onto staff is completely unacceptable, but also shows that this is a person that will not take responsibility for anything and believes he's beyond accountability. And I think, ultimately he has been exposed as being in breach of parliamentary rules, rightly so, and at last he is being held to account for the vast amounts of money he is making when he's not in Parliament and not representing his constituents, which clearly he has no interest in whatsoever.
He has issued a full apology. I mean, quite an abject one, actually, but some interesting points there. Victoria?
Well, whilst we may disagree on policy issues, actually there are often areas of agreement across political parties. And one of the things I know that Rachel and I both care about is the cynicism that the public have about politics and politicians. And this sort of behaviour is exactly the sort of behaviour that feeds that cynicism. And so the fact that it is a pattern of, I think you said 17 occasions, that suggests either he doesn't care or he is incompetent. I just don't know how he can claim that he didn't know that he had to do this. And so it's a very great shame. All right, he's apologised, but I don't think he's helped the wider political class and our democracy with this sort of behaviour.
Isn't that beautiful to see the two parties united in bashing Nigel Farage? It says there is something that can still bring this country together.
It must be so difficult for him and all other MPs to have to file all this extra money that he's been earning from the outside. So I think we should just make it really easy for him. Let's do a real kindness and ban second jobs. He shouldn't be doing all of this outside stuff if he wants to be an MP. He can earn loads of money on the speaking tour or whatever after he finishes. No doubt he will. He can maybe take a loan. You know, students have to take a loan out about that against their future earnings so that they can go to university. Maybe he can take a loan out against his future earnings after politics and not be a part-time MP and earning all of this money. Then he won't have to do the paperwork.
This is a recipe for MPs being very strange professional political activists. I'd rather they had...
Have you met them?
I'd rather
with the greatest respect to our friends here.
If being a parliamentarian was their second job in most cases. I mean, are you going to rule doctors out from being MPs? There's an exception there, isn't there?
Yes,
there's always an exception
what a surprise, yes. For things where you have to maintain a professional qualification to do it, or there's genuinely some public value, but you can't say that doing extremely expensive legal work, let's say, for a tax haven registered entity, or doing, hundreds of thousands of pounds speaking tours are the same thing as an A&E doctor doing 2 shifts a month or whatever to keep their hand in. It's not the same thing. The public
what about
also
somebody
know
who
about
runs
it.
their own business? What about
I have to say, I don't know how any MP has time for a second job. I'm working 24/7 trying to represent my constituents.
They could be a bad MP. But they could just be a bad MP. It's up to the constituents to say, I don't think you're doing a good job, and vote them out. It's not for us to set rules about who should and shouldn't be an MP. I don't want to rule Nigel Farage out from standing for Parliament because I don't like his CV. That's absurd.
I'm not ruling him out from standing for Parliament. I'm saying now you're in Parliament, that's your main job.
Yeah, but the consequence is that lots and lots of professional people will just not run for Parliament because they'll realise it'll impoverish them.
I'm just not sure that's the case. I mean, this is always the argument that is put forward. But if we were to do it now, how many MPs do you think are going to say no, I'm not going to do that because I'm earning so much money? And what loss to public life would it be? I think basically none. And instead you'd have the substantially lower chance of corruption, none of these nonsense scandals that we get all of the time where some fake Korean company is paying MPs £10,000 to do some advisory work or so on and so forth. And that's the stuff that really undermines public trust in politics. I think we could get rid of all of it.
OK, we will move on in just a moment. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 8:46.
This is LBC.
The following
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:49, Victoria Atkins, Rachel Maskell, James Schneider and Tim Stanley with us answering your questions. Here's one from Martha in Peacehaven. Is this talk of a social media ban another example of old people trying to set rules around issues they don't understand? Well, as you heard a few minutes ago, the House of Lords has just voted in favour of banning under-16s from using social media platforms, which would replicate the law introduced in Australia just over a month ago. Kemi Badenoch, as you said, Victoria, is very pro this. She's, I think, 46. Am I right? Does that count as old? But she's for a politician. She's quite sort of good on social media, understands it.
Yeah. Well, look, I think actually it's mums and dads primarily caring about the impact that social media has on their children. I'm a mum of a teenage boy, and Kemi, as the working mum of young children, she shares, as I do, the concerns of mums and dads up and down the country as to the impact that social media is having on our children. And so I'm really pleased that the House of Lords has voted this way tonight. It'll be up to the government as to whether or not they're going to send their backbench MPs through the division lobbies to vote against this. I think that's going to be quite difficult for Keir Starmer, but we are determined as a party to focus on the issues that are really, people really care about, and social media use by children and young people and the impact on children and young people. It's not just the horrendous stories that we hear of abuse and mental ill health and so on that we hear. It's also the evidence coming out from clinicians now that if babies and toddlers spend too much time on phones, then it impedes their ability to speak. And we know that schools are beginning to see more non-verbal children than they may have done a few years ago. And we have to ask the question, is that because of screen time?
But surely the alternative to this is to regulate the social media companies, because it is within their gift, isn't it, to change their platforms so they're inaccessible to people under a certain age.
And clearly there has to be a holistic approach to this. I have to say, when I was in the Home Office looking after tackling violence against women and girls, one of the biggest issues we had with child sexual exploitation and the exploitation of adults is that when you ask these great big tech companies, by the way, who are based overseas, they don't feel obliged to follow the law in the UK, or they are, the very, very worst sites are based in dark parts of the web that we cannot get access to. Okay. And so it's very difficult to set those. But of course, we should absolutely carry that work on as well, because that is critical that they clear up their own backyards.
James.
The bosses of big tech companies, generally speaking, don't allow their children access to these products, which tells you pretty much everything you need to know. But if you wanted to know more or need more evidence, we should look at the numeracy and literacy rates of our children. Basically, as long as this has been measured, they go up a small amount every year on year on year. And since 2012, they've been falling, and in more recent years, falling precipitously.
We're number 4 in the World League tables on reading.
Yes, but we've been going. If you look at how numerate or literate our children are now, it is below where it was in 2012, and it's falling year on year. Now, you can ban it, or you can enforce regulation one way or the other. In China, their TikTok equivalent, I think it's under 16s or under 14s are only allowed 45 minutes a day. They're only allowed on between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. And the company has a mandate that it's got to put out a certain amount of educational content into people's streams. Either the companies have to radically change the way in which they operate, or there should be a ban. And I think it is good to have the stick of saying, if you are doing harm to children, and therefore to society, then we will stop your product.
Rachel?
It's not just the content, and I think that argument's been really well made, but obviously the developing brain has been seriously impeded because of the scrolling dependency which is being developed as well, and therefore I do welcome this decision by the House of Lords. I think many people in the House of Commons were saying, why stop at 16? Because I think it would improve all of our lives if we didn't have to pay attention to some of these platforms today. But I think
Kemi's advisors are saying do it from 47.
I'm sure that will increase year on year as well. I think there is a really serious question behind that, and that's whether or not social media, what started as a social good of connectivity, has now turned into a really toxic space with AI bots which are driving content. And I think ultimately this now is a very unsafe place for people to be. And I just look at the patterns we've had around the dependency of smoking and how we've addressed that in a way of diverting people from developing those dependent behaviours, and ultimately the harm this is doing to our young people, the rise and spike in mental health with our young people, the way that so many young people, I mean, I've got in my constituency 91% of children have got a social media account. That's extortionate when you think about the harm that is causing. So I think we've got to divert, and therefore putting the investment in youth services across our constituency, giving young people an alternative, because it's not just about use in school, because that can be a much more controlled space. It's what's happening in people's bedrooms when kids are scrolling through the night, and I think we've got to find the alternatives from that. So I do welcome this as a first step, but I do agree with Lisa and Andy, putting this out for consultation is really important, bringing young people on that journey, hearing from young people. Their voices have got to be at the centre of this debate, and very much I'm going to be engaging with my constituents, and I hope all MPs do, so that we can really shape this with young people for their future, but also for the sake of all of us.
Tim?
I'm reluctant to ban things. I think Britain has a habit, whenever there's a social problem, of just banning something. We're on our way to banning cigarettes and non-alcoholic drinks that might be attractive to children, and horse riding, because when you ban trail hunting, that's essentially what you're doing. You're banning horse riding. No foxes are actually being hunted. In this case, I think there's an interesting parallel to be made with smoking. I wouldn't ban cigarettes. I think that's a wicked infringement of individual liberty. I don't think kids should be allowed to smoke them. And likewise, social media plainly has medical effects. The human brain takes a long time to develop. Mine still is going. And I struggle.
I know, I've listened to your podcast.
I struggle with addiction to social media. You know, I look at it too much. So I have to go through periods where I say, I'm putting it aside. I won't touch, like over Christmas. Didn't look at the internet almost once. Imagine how a child with such an undeveloped brain struggles with that. The time has come to recognize that social media is bad for your health, and to regulate it where we can and should regulate it. I do think if I could wave a magic wand, I would make social media responsible for everything they publish. That in the same way that my newspaper is. My newspaper cannot publish a letter which is Nazi or encouraging people to commit suicide or anything like that. We'd face legal action. And the same should be true of social media companies. And also the reason why, as James mentioned, or someone mentioned, that they are based abroad is to avoid tax. And I think if there's one area where I'd like to see international cooperation, it's on chasing those people down and making them pay properly the tax.
Yeah.
Right. Let's go to our fun question. It's from Sammy in East Grinstead. If you were banned from social media, which platform would you miss the most, and which one would you miss the least? James?
I would miss YouTube the most, I think, because that for me is just football tactics videos and some highlight clips from cricket and a bit of chess strategy. So I would actually miss that. And Instagram I only post on, so I get no loss from that. But probably Twitter is the most toxic, so maybe I'd be happiest rid of that.
Victoria?
This will make my team laugh, because you can imagine any Member of Parliament and as Shadow Secretary of State, an awful lot of time is spent on social media. I think from a local perspective, Facebook is tends to be the platform where we have our local constituency followers. So that's particularly special. Which one would I not miss? I mean, I can't get terribly excited about Twitter. I actually came off Twitter from, I think, 2016, and I had to go back on when I was made a Secretary of State, but I could live without Twitter quite happily.
Rachel?
X, whatever it's called.
I think we're probably united on the X factor here, so certainly wouldn't miss that. But I'm certainly fine with my constituents. They're loving to hold a piece of paper and a newsletter through the letterbox. So I think kind of reverting to some of those traditional ways of communicating is the future. And ultimately, we know that people actually read the stuff and engage with it. So I think let's go back to conventions of the past.
You're sounding so like a Daily Telegraph columnist. Tim?
I think I might miss Instagram, which is just very nice. I mean, it was fake. I mean, obviously every picture on there is touched up and all that sort of thing. But people seem to behave well when they're on Instagram, like they've been invited to a nice house or something like that. Whereas Twitter is vile. And since that strange South African took it over, it's just become porn and Mein Kampf. Or is that my algorithm? I always worry when I raise this complaint, there's a lot of Nazi porn on Twitter, that it's actually giving away the vast amount of Nazi porn I've searched for. That's what concerns me.
You see, I find that with Instagram Reels, which I'm addicted to when I go home on the train at night, and I get all of these sort of Anyway, let's move on. Right. Now, Chris has asked me to say that if you've been troubled by any of the discussions you've heard in the past few minutes, I don't know why you should be, but anyway, don't forget that you can always contact the Samaritans for free at any time of day or night. You can call 116123, that's 116123, or you can email Joe, that's jo@samaritans.org. I'm trying to remember which part of our conversation might have provoked that. But anyway, it's always good advice. Right, thank you all very much indeed for joining us tonight. On tomorrow's panel, we have the columnist and former London Evening Standard editor, Emily Sheffield, Labour peer and former Union leader, Baroness Mary Boustard, former Green Party leader, Baroness Natalie Bennett, and the former Conservative MP and Minister, Steve Baker. They'll be with me from 8 o'clock on Cross Question tomorrow night. Well, coming up in the next hour, we're going to take a break from Donald Trump. I think everybody deserves at least an hour a day away from Donald Trump. Have you cheated in your driving test? Because 47% increase in people who are cheating in their driving test, either in the theory, where apparently they get someone through a Bluetooth connection to feed them the answers, or in your actual driving test. That's if you can get a driving test, of course, because the queues are so long. They've been like this for years. The last government didn't do anything about it. This government doesn't seem to have done much either. Why is that? And what's your best driving test disaster story? That's what I really want.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, Donald Trump's announced a dramatic U-turn over Greenland just hours after claiming an American takeover was vital for global security. He's dropped a threat of European tariffs and says a framework deal has been formed. Earlier, he ruled out the use of force to take over it. The US president's been taking reporters' questions in Davos.
Does it still include the United States having ownership of Greenland like you've said you wanted?
It's a long-term deal. It's the ultimate long-term deal. And I think it puts everybody in a really good position, especially as it pertains to security and minerals and everything else.
Earlier, the Prime Minister insisted he would not yield to Donald Trump over the future of Greenland. Sir Keir Starmer has been addressing MPs in the Commons during this lunchtime's PMQs.
I have made my position clear on our principles and values. The first of those is that the future of Greenland is for the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone. The second is that threats of tariffs to pressurise allies are completely wrong.
A 56-year-old woman will be sentenced in March after being found guilty of modern slavery offences. Amanda Wixon kept a woman against her will for more than 25 years and repeatedly beat and starved her. Members of the House of Lords have backed a social media ban for under-16s. They voted in favour of a proposed amendment to the government's schools bill. It will now be sent back to the Commons for consideration by MPs. Victoria Atkins, Conservative Shadow Environment Secretary, told LBC she's pleased.
It'll be up to the government as to whether or not they're going to send their backbench MPs through the division lobbies to vote against this. I think that's going to be quite difficult for Keir Starmer. But we are determined as a party to focus on the issues that are really, people really care about, and social media use by children and young people and the impact on children and young people.
And the Prince of Wales will visit Saudi Arabia next month at the government's request. Kensington Palace says the trip will celebrate growing trade, energy and investment ties between the two countries. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 11 points at 10,138. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.14. LBC weather. Showers in the west tonight, more continuous rain in northeast Scotland, a low of 3 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 9:04 on LBC. Hope you're watching us on Global Player, the LBC app or the LBC YouTube channel, as well as listening to us via the traditional means. Now, we all remember our driving test, don't we? I mean, most people, certainly of my age group, have done either one or more driving tests over the years. I think among younger generations, particularly if you live in a big city, fewer and fewer people are taking a driving test and learning to drive. If you live in central London, why would you need to learn to drive, I suppose? I think that is possibly not a good decision in the long term, because later in life you might live in the countryside, you might need to have a car to get around. My mother, I remember, she started to learn to drive and then I think gave up at the age of 27, 28 or something. I don't know exactly what her age was. And she always regretted not continuing with it. And I could not wait to get on the road after my 17th birthday. I got a driving test 3 months after my 17th birthday. I only had 2 lessons. I knew how to drive a car because I lived on a farm, so I was driving my dad's Morris Minor pickup truck around the fields the whole time, so I could drive. So I had a couple of driving lessons just because I thought I ought to. And I did pass first time. However, I still don't really know how I did, because fairly early on in the test, the examiner said to me, turn left at the next junction. So I indicated to turn left, looked in the rearview mirror, turned left, and then felt the back left-hand wheel go up the curb. Thought, well, that's it, I failed. But I passed. I suppose that must have taken all the nerves away, because for the rest of it, I must have driven perfectly normally. And so he forgave me that one mistake. I suspect many other examiners wouldn't have done. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Well, it's because today it turns out that cheating cases during practical and theory driving tests have risen by 47% over the UK. Well, that's actually England, Scotland and Wales. The figures don't include Northern Ireland. And the cheating methods, and I thought to myself, well, how do you cheat in a driving test? My mother told me that when she took her tractor driving test, no sniggering at the back, please, she knew that she would have to read out number plates from cars parked on the road, and she had pretty bad eyesight. So before the test, she went and memorised all the cars for about 100 yards up the road, and that got her through it. I don't think that counts as cheating, does it? I suppose it might do. But how do you cheat in a driving test, whether it's the theory part, which I never had to do, and the practical part, the actual driving test? Now, I suppose you can have someone impersonate you on the actual driving test. And it turns out that people are using Bluetooth devices for answers to be given to them for the theory test. Well, that all surely is easily put right, isn't it? If somebody, you surely should have to be given ID, give your ID to the examiner before you start. And don't tell me that 17-year-olds don't have ID, because there'll be some form of ID that they can use. So there's been a Freedom of Information request put into the Driving and Vehicle Standards Agency, the DVSA, the agency formerly known as the DVLA, with more than 1,100 cases involving the use of Bluetooth headsets. Overall, nearly 100 offenders were prosecuted for trying to cheat themselves or for impersonating driving test candidates. Now, industry leaders have blamed the increase on the nationwide shortage of tests and drivers drivers' desperation to pass, while the DVSA blamed a general rise in cheating and improved detection. Well, a press association news agency, Freedom of Information request, revealed 2,844 attempts to cheat during driving tests in the year to September 2025, 47% higher than the previous year. So I want to ask you what you're putting this cheating down to. Do you know somebody that's cheated in a driving test? I'm not going to say, if you've cheated in a driving test, give me a call, because I don't think that would be a particularly lucrative way of getting people to phone in to the programme. But you might well know someone that does. But secondly, how frustrating is it that there are so many delays on being able to even get a driving test at the moment? What do you put that down to, apart from just utterly administrative incompetence at the DVSA? It's been a problem for successive governments. I don't think the situation has improved particularly greatly. I think the waiting times now are quite a few months. I don't know why on earth this is happening. I don't think it's a resource issue. I think it is basically it's not being run very well. We had this with the passport office, didn't we, not that long ago, where there was such long waits for passports. Then almost overnight, somebody new came in to run the passport agency. And at that point, I'd just applied for a passport. I got mine back within 7 days. Now, why on earth can't that be the same with the DVSA? And also, it's just a bit of fun, your most disastrous driving test experiences. What went wrong in your particular driving test? Let's have a competition, possibly on the text 84850. What's the most number of times that someone's taken a test before they've passed? I know somebody who took their test 6 times, but I'm sure that you can beat that. Let's talk to Seb Goldin, who is Chief Executive of Red Driving Training, which trains both learner drivers and driving instructors. Seb, great to talk to you. First of all, what's your experience with the DVSA? Why does it take so long for people to get their tests? And is it putting people off coming to you for training?
It's a huge and growing problem, Ian. Very frustrating. I mean, as you were alluding to in your warm-up there, passing your driving test, certainly I'm of a similar vintage to you, was a rite of passage back in the day. And you'd turn 17 without too much hassle. You'd have a couple of driving lessons, and similar to you, I passed in about 3 months. Now, there's a 6-month waiting list to even get a test after you passed your theory. And there might be light at the end of the tunnel. The DVSA have recently sacked their chief executive, and a new person has been appointed. I don't know if their background was from the passport office, because if it was, they might have the miracle cure. DVSA, I mean, we work very closely with them. DVSA had a plan a year ago to recruit 450 additional driving examiners. So just to put some context on the country, there are 400 test centres in the UK. There are around 1,600 driving examiners working out of those test centres. Since 2019, just before COVID, there's been a growth of in the number of there's a demand growth of over 35-40% of driving tests. But the DVSA have not kept pace with that. Their plan to recruit 450 would have, kept them just above it, but they've completely failed. They've only managed to recruit about 50 additional driving instructors. It's gone political. The government have claimed that they're calling the army in. Again, in our opinion, that's just moving the deck chairs around. Getting 30 army examiners in is not going to move the dial at all. It might make reasonable headlines.
Sorry, did I understand that right? They've only managed to recruit 50 driving instructors.
Yes, 50, yeah.
I mean, it takes a degree of incompetence for that to happen, surely. I mean, given that we have a lot of people looking for work, and okay, everyone has to be trained, I get that, and it wouldn't be a job for everybody, I get that too. But, I mean, how is the person who runs the DVSA still in their job?
I mean, if it was the private sector, they wouldn't be, would they?
No, quite.
I mean, it's astounding that you can have a plan, but without any means of execution to follow through and recruit people. It's ridiculous. And the poor students who are, it's encouraging for our business that people have to continue to have driving lessons to keep test ready whilst they wait for tests. But to the point of this freedom of information request around fraud and people using fake identities and other cheat methods, that's just being driven because there's more demand than the system can take, and people are desperate to either pass or find ways of buying tests illegally rather than directly from the DVSA. So the system is rife with fraud. There are fraudulent, people are showing up pretending to be different people with different identities for both the theory and the practical. Your point earlier around sort of pass rate.
But how does that even work? Because surely you have to have a provisional license to even take the theory test, and presumably the provisional license has the picture of the person on it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it comes down to enforcement. If there's a vague, I wouldn't know, if there's a vague similarity of how people look. I think the story of people having Bluetooth headphones in is hilarious. That, I mean, first of all, how can they not notice they've got the headphones in, and then they sit there being fed information? It's quite a ridiculous situation, really. But the pass rate of theory is easier to pass maths GCSE than it is the theory. So the pass rate is 48%.
I mean, I'm too old to have had to do the theory test, which I'm eternally grateful for. But I mean, is it really that difficult?
I mean, look, it's like everything. If you put a bit of a shift in, you're going to pass. I think there are some people that have some language issues with it. There's been, since Brexit, there's been a spike of immigration of people who've come from countries who have to then, to drive in the UK, have to take the driving test. So that's put even more demand into the system. So back in the day of the EU.
Well, another thing to blame Brexit for, but I hope James O'Brien's not listening.
Exactly. It's another unintended consequence.
And in terms of, if you were in charge of the DVSA now, what would you do to improve the system?
I would create and put in place very quickly a new booking system that can't be hacked. And, if Glastonbury can sell 350,000 tickets or whatever it is in 24 hours and know who they're selling them to, there's no reason that the DVSA should have bots stealing their test bookings. And then beyond that, I would recruit sufficient resource to match the demand. Like we do in our business, we forecast demand, we recruit instructors, trainers, staff to match the demand. It's as simple as that. And I think one of the big challenges is the rates of pay and remuneration. Historically, these were, they still are civil servant roles, but they used to have rates of pay that were appealing to people and pension packages they don't now. So I think it just makes them very hard. It used to be considered. Being a driving instructor, so we at Red, we recruit around 1 in 4 driving instructors and train them to qualify as a driving instructor. Probably 10 years ago plus, it was a bit of a sort of semi-retirement gig, and people would do it later in their career. Now, the average age of the people that are becoming driving instructors is sort of mid-late 20s with us, and people are earning, it's a really good career. And you can earn really good money. You're very busy. It's a lifestyle. And then because of that, people are not then thinking, well, I'll become an examiner when I'm in my mid-50s, early 60s, because actually they can earn such good money and have a good lifestyle as a driving instructor. So we're kind of part of the problem because people are no longer seeing being a driving examiner as a nice, easy, bookend to their driving career.
Do you have to be a certain type of person to be a good driving instructor? I remember taking my sister out when she was learning, and it only happened once because it frightened the life out of me, and I thought I could never be a professional driver. Although I love driving, do you have to have a certain mentality?
You absolutely do, and some of you need to have very good people skills, enjoy coaching. Some of our most successful driving instructors have been teachers in their previous careers. Kind of makes sense. And you've got to have good nerves and very good communication skills. So you don't clip that back wheel as you did on your test on that first left-hand turn you did.
Well, let's just finish off with your most horrendous story of taking someone out on a driving lesson, or sort of the most horrendous story you've heard from someone in their test.
I mean, fortunately, I'm not actually a driving instructor myself.
Oh, you're not?
I'm a business, no. I have heard of someone who, a friend of a friend of a friend, who had a couple of drinks too many the night before and actually got busted for drink driving in their driving test. So there you go. That's a low bar for you.
Well, see if anybody can beat that over the next 40 minutes. Thank you very much indeed, Seb. That's Seb Goldin, Chief Executive of Red Driving Training. They train both learner drivers and driving instructors. Well, that's a career, isn't it? I mean, I know that I couldn't do that job. And I like to think I have reasonable people skills, but I think I would be frightened out of my life by some people. I'm thinking of somebody that I work with now and thinking about teaching them to drive. I just couldn't do it. So let's talk about the failure of the DVSA. What can be done to reform the DVSA so it provides a better service to the public? It is a public service, and the public deserve to have good public services. And don't come on and say, oh, well, they must need more money. It's nothing to do with money. It's admin. The Passport Office didn't get more money when it got itself out of its difficulties. It got better managers, and they implemented better systems. I mean, if you've worked for the DVSA or used to, I think the DVLA still exists. It's just it's for lorry licenses, isn't it? The DVLA now. If you've got your own experiences with them, we'd love to hear. I mean, good or bad. Let's not make this a sort of attack the DVSA program. We're happy to hear good stories as well, but also your own experience of driving lessons, driving tests, and. Well, obviously, we want to hear sort of some either funny experiences or particularly horrific ones. It's 9:20.
This is LBC.
The following
Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
9:22. Little bit of an advert now for my All Talk podcast. There's a new edition out today. And we feature LBC presenter and all-round brilliant employment barrister Daniel Barnett. So if you'd like to hear about his life, his career, his experiences presenting on LBC, you can go to Global Player and download that episode now for free. Right. Let's take a step into the world of driving lessons and driving tests. I've never seen so many texts come in all at once. Here's one from Christos. I called in for the first time a couple of weeks ago in regards to this driving test issue. I'm currently waiting to retake my test in Nottingham with a minimum 6-month wait if you're lucky. When trying to book, slots are instantly taken by bots. It's impossible. Well, that is a fault in the system, isn't it? That is a fault in the software, because there are all sorts of websites that don't have that problem. There's Capture, where you can prove that you're not a bot. Obviously, they're not using that. So if you're the head of the DVSA and listening to this programme on catch-up, presumably, that is a pretty simple problem to solve. And it's outrageous that people aren't being able to book because all of the tests are being taken by bots. It's ridiculous. Do your job and actually make the system work. Phil is in Redditch. Hello, Phil.
Hi, how are you, Ian? You well?
I'm well, but I'm really angry about this, actually, because people should not have to wait 6 months for a driving test. They never used to. There's no excuse for it.
No, there's something a bit more sinister to all this than just the wait. My son's been waiting for 14 months. He's 23 years of age. We live in a fairly rural area, and he needs to be able to drive. He can drive perfectly well, but he cannot get a test. In my case, and I speak on behalf of other people in my position because there are thousands of them. I'm 70 years of age. I'm an HGV driver. I came back into the industry getting on for 8 years ago. From the age of 65, I am required by law, according to DVSA, DVLA, whatever they want to call themselves this week, to renew my HGV license every year. Okay, and I have to go to a certified doctor that is certified to take HGV medicals, spend my 70 quid on the medical, send my license with the renewal to DVSA, who will then renew the license. I put my renewal in on the 11th of October last year, and I'm now still waiting for it. Now, okay, it's only January. The problem is this. Because now we've all gone electronic, if I get stopped by the police, they'll look on their magic electronic device and they'll see that my license is invalid because they haven't issued a new license with my HGV entitlement on it. Although if you call the DVSA, I spent 4 or 5 times doing this, 2 hours, 2.5 hours on the phone waiting to speak to somebody. When you get to the main switchboard, they put up your details, and I ask for the medical section, and they say, "Well, we don't hold that on this computer. I can't give you any details about the medical section," which is a complete waste of time because I'm calling to find out whether my license has been issued, and they can't tell me. I got really exasperated, and they threatened to cancel my license if I was really angry because this is stuff. So eventually, on the 5th time that I'd called them, they put me through from their switchboard to the medical section. I waited another hour and 20 minutes and eventually got through, and I was told by the lady on the switchboard in the medical department, I can't tell you when it will be ready because the caseworker that works on these cases isn't available. You'll have to call back again. And I said to them, "Have you changed the address on my license?" And she said, "Well, what's your address?" So I gave her my address, and she said, "That's not the address that's on your license." I know it isn't, but I changed the address when I renewed the license. So not only if I get stopped by the police, it will show the wrong address, and it will show the fact that my HGV1 entitlement has expired, and along with it, my car license has expired. And she said, "Oh, you're okay, you're covered. You can drive under Section 88 of the Road Traffic Act." Well, have you ever stood by the side of a road with a policeman that has got the possibility of arresting you for driving without a license and tell them, "Oh, I can drive under Section 88"? How can you prove it? But I've done a little bit of research on this, and apparently you might want to do a Freedom of Information Act request on this. There are 250,000 medical renewals waiting to be dealt with. 250,000. This is all the people that are 70 and upwards. For me, because it's a professional license, professional section, I have to do it every year. As it stands at the moment, until the law changes, and the law is about to change apparently, at 70, you renew for 3 years. You renew your car license for 3 years.
Yeah.
So, they're making all these changes around licensing and trying under the guise of making it safer. And they're building a rod for their own back.
So has your renewal come through now?
No, it hasn't. No.
Right. Well, here's a bit of advice. A friend of mine is listening to you speaking, Phil, and she works for an MP in the House of Commons, and she says, tell him to go to his MP. We do this all the time. So effectively, they then take up your case with the DVSA, and you then get prioritised because an MP has got involved, because they don't like it when MPs get involved.
Well, that's great advice, and I'm very grateful for that. But we've had cases where that's happened, and nothing has happened after it. And just as a final piece, this is how desperate it is. I have been offered 2 jobs. Okay, 2 jobs. I can't take either of those jobs because I can't produce my license. My current job, I'm likely to be out of work within the next 6 or 8 weeks because the insurance industry are saying, why have we got all these drivers out on the roads with no licenses? So that they're withdrawing insurance cover from companies that have people like me that are waiting for the licenses. It's abysmal. I've never had to deal with so many incompetent people in my entire life that frankly don't give a damn. They're just robots. They say what's on the script to get you off the phone.
Well, if I were you, I would be contacting my MP. Your MP is Chris Bloor. I'm sure you know that, but it can't do any harm, and hopefully it will do some good.
Absolutely. And for the youngsters out there that are waiting for the test, my heart bleeds for them.
Yeah.
You know, that independence of getting out on the road. My son's got a car. I bought him a car for his birthday, and it's sat in the drive rotting away because he can't drive it. He doesn't have a license. He hasn't passed his test. Crazy.
Okay, Phil, thank you very much. Rich says, my son had to wait for so long for a test that he had to retake the theory test as it expired after 2 years of first passing it. It's ridiculous. Well, you couldn't get a test for 2 years. Come on, that cannot be right. All right, more of your stories in a moment and your experiences with the DVSA. Maybe we should adopt this as a cause on this programme to get the DVSA to get its act together. It's 9:30 on LBC. Daryl Jackson has the news headlines.
Donald Trump appears to have made a dramatic climb down on owning Greenland and dropped his plans for tariffs on the UK and European countries over their opposition. Instead, he says a solution has been found and a framework deal's being drawn up. The US president made the announcement after talks with NATO's Secretary General. Members of the House of Lords have backed a social media ban for under-16s. They voted in favour of a proposed amendment to the government's schools bill. It will now be sent back to the Commons for consideration by MPs. And Prince Harry's dismissed claims he had leaky social circles as he testifies at the High Court against the owner of the Daily Mail. He's among the famous faces accusing Associated Newspapers of gathering information unlawfully, which it denies. LBC weather: showers in the west tonight, more rain in northeast Scotland, lows of 3 degrees.
This is LBC.
Octopus
Dale on LBC.
9:33, as I say, lots of text coming in. No, we've already done that one, so let's move on to the next one. Cassandra says, I failed my driving test 5 times. On my 5th time, I did the perfect drive, got to the very end and was pulling into the rest centre car park. I rolled ever so slightly forward, so as I misjudged where the curb and wall was in front of the car and bumped into it very lightly. I turned to the inspector and he said, you literally just failed. You just did the perfect test. No errors. I'm so sorry. Try again and you'll definitely pass. I said, what? He said, you hit the wall and you can't hit stuff. I was very annoyed, but passed on the 6th try. Well done. Try again. That's what my mother always said. Another one here from Alistair. I knocked a wing mirror off a car when I pulled out of the test centre. It turned out to be the examiner's car. I knew I'd failed, but he made me continue. Then he had to use the emergency brake. Thankfully, I passed the 2nd time. And another one. Deborah says, I took mine in Tunbridge Wells in 1989. It was the 2nd time. The instructor made me pull over in the middle main light junction, told me I was dangerous and walked back to the test centre, leaving me in the car alone. I could drive, but was just too nervous. It scarred me, and I didn't take my test until 10 years later at 27 and passed, even though I went left instead of right. I don't think that's actually allowed for an examiner to actually get out of the car and leave you abandoned. Right, let's go to Alice, who's in Hammersmith. Alice, hi.
Okay, so I can confirm that it is allowed because it happened to me.
Oh, no.
So just on the call that you had before, the DVSA or the DVLA are terrible because on my licence, it's got my first name twice. And I've called up and complained to them about it because I can't use it as valid ID because it's not me. And they just told me I have to pay to have it changed when they're the ones who made the mistake. But anyway, that's another story. So I did my driving test 7 times, and then on one of those tests, I got told to get out of the car in the interest of public safety, because as soon as before I even left the test centre, I'd reversed into the test centre, crashed into the actual test centre. So that was like, the bay parking. I've gone all the way back in and smashed the examiner's car up. And I thought, oh my God, I haven't even left the test centre and I've already failed. And he said, drive on. So I carried on driving out of the test centre. I think I was like proper dangerous. I was like going over roundabouts and sort of round them, hitting curbs. And then he just slammed his hand on the dashboard, emergency stop. I think he hit the brakes because it was my driving instructor's car. And he said, get out. And then the driving instructor's not insured to drive the examiner's car. So you have to just leave it in the middle of the road and then do the walk of shame back to the test centre. And I remember I did my test in Tolworth. So, yeah, so that is a thing.
And how long after that did you actually pass your test?
Well, my driving instructor at the time, he said, there's nothing else I could do for you.
So it's basically saying, Alice, you're a danger to yourself, you're a danger to your country, you're a danger to your family, never drive again.
Yeah, I literally had to think out the box because I kept on failing, so I had to think outside the box. So what I did was, I was never going to pass my test, so I had to, so what I did was just, I know it sounds really bad, but I just went to get another test, and I just thought, well, I've got a really good personality, so I just really made friends, sort of turned up a little bit overdone for the test and laughed at the examiner's joke. And I had a young examiner and he passed me. I couldn't believe it, and I was doing all these mistakes and he just passed me after that. But I've been driving since 2005 now, and I'm still driving, so I'm fine now.
So you passed on the 2nd attempt?
No, the 8th attempt.
And where do you live, Hammersmith? I'm going to watch out for you. And should I ever be driving in Hammersmith, Alice?
Yeah, at work people used to say, "Oh, what time are you leaving work?" And I'd go, "Oh, at 5 o'clock." And they'd be like, "Everybody, she's leaving at 5. Give it an hour until she's cleared the area."
But do you think you're a good driver now?
I'm a brilliant driver now. I mean, I drive to I just did a long drive to Manchester. I drive to Wales all the time. I work as a surveyor, so I drive for my job to do inspections. I'm a great driver now. Brilliant.
And what kind of car do you drive?
Well, at the moment, I've got... Oh, God, watch out for it.
One with big bumpers, I assume.
It's an SUV, so it's a Peugeot 2000.
I thought it might be an SUV for valid reasons, Alice, I think. Thank you very much indeed. Right, this is another text. My sister passed on her 9th attempt, which was always surprising because she was a brainiac, took her GCSEs a year earlier and went on to become a dentist. We still laugh about it to this day. She's 41 now, but still dreads driving. Root canals, no problem, but driving from Leeds to Manchester stresses her out. I think that stresses most people out. That's Cheyenne from Leeds. Let's go to Jude in Paris. Now, if you can drive in Paris, Jude, you can drive anywhere, can't you?
Oh, come on, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. But yeah, what I wanted to say was because of Brexit, I had to get a driving license here and I couldn't exchange. God knows the bureaucracy. And I had to take the test 8 times. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
8 times. And every time I had to book the test through some agent or some person for €360 every single time. And I passed on the 8th time. And I couldn't get a test when I wanted anywhere through the proper website.
So this is the French equivalent of the DVSA?
No. I'm talking about the DVSA. Here in London, to get a driving license here in London, in the UK.
Right.
So what I'm trying to say is I couldn't find a test center or a test date for the last 4 years. It took me 4 years to get a place, and that too, I had to pay through. There are ample. Everybody knows this. WhatsApp chat groups, other groups that you could get whichever date on whichever time, whichever test center you want. You just have to cough up, but you wouldn't be able to get that on the site.
And each time you had to pay €360?
No, pounds here.
Pounds.
€360, yes. For every test I had to take in the UK. I'm talking about the UK driving license.
Is that really what a driving test costs now, like £300?
No, a test, just for the test costs £62. But you won't get a place. You won't get a date. You won't get a test date.
But you just said it costs $300.
Yes, it's through someone who's an agent or people who block driving schools.
Oh, I see.
You see what am I making sense?
Yeah, so effectively you're getting scammed.
No, but I mean, this is what the norm is. It's not just me.
No, I'm not saying it is.
This is the only way you could get a driving test, unless you're very lucky. Even if you know to yes.
I mean, it's outrageous that if people are being scammed, if bots are taking places, it's also outrageous if you can pay a lot more money to get a slot. But even then, it doesn't seem to be working. Thank you very much indeed. Right, this is from Sam in Radstock near Bath. I took 9 times to pass my test at 18. Luckily, my final examiner was about to retire. Never saw my instructor afterwards. I think he retired to a warmer climate. That was 20 years ago. And I've never had to make a claim. Why would you need to make a claim? I don't really get that. David's in Nottingham. Hello, David.
Hi.
Go ahead.
So I used to work at the DVSA, and I completely sympathise with your callers. My experience there is that the leadership isn't prioritising or hasn't been prioritising the right things. And the terrible situation where people are having to pay scammers and bots and other things is horrendous. But I think, the experience we talked about, because, I worked in the DVSA, was we know how many kids are turning 17 years in advance. So we should be able to plan this. We should know that, in 2030, this is how many people are going to turn 17. So you have so much time to plan your workforce management side of things. And even when I worked with them, I knew they were focusing on it, but there just wasn't the intent and wasn't the desire to solve it, because I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I always think in these cases that the reason an organisation fails it's not generally because of the people who are doing the day-to-day work. It's a failure of leadership from the top. It's like a failing school is usually the fault of a weak head teacher who can't control either the pupils or the teaching staff, and chaos ensues. And I suspect that's the same at an organisation like the DVSA.
My view is it was a mix of both, right? There were people who'd been there for long enough that they just got promoted to a level of incompetence. There were people who got, we were told by other government departments, don't measure failure. Don't look at that. Don't try and measure this, because if we're asked, we have to tell them. It's a really weird atmosphere. It's just like Yes Minister.
Yeah.
Whereas you don't have a culture of rewarding outcomes and improvements. You have a culture of, well, I'm here, I'll just do what I need to do. And it's really sad, because a lot of people, when I worked there, who were trying to do the right thing, but they just looked around them and thought, well, everyone else doesn't care, so why should I bother? And no one else was holding them to account. So I really feel for all your callers. Like the last caller who had to pay, a scammer, essentially, someone who could book a test, whether he was from a driving centre or someone else, to get that's horrendous. No one should go through that.
David, thank you very much for calling in. Linda says, I took my second driving test in Lowestoft. I was doing so well till I drove up a busy street and had to wait behind a coach. After about a minute, the examiner said to me, how long do you intend to wait here? A little confused, I said, until the coach moves on, to which he replied tersely, it's parked. Needless to say, I passed on the third attempt. That's from Lou in Suffolk. Right, we'll take more of your calls and texts in just a few moments. It's 9:45.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
As Donald Trump backs down on invading Greenland after striking a deal with NATO, has the US president played a blinder? Plus, is Elon Musk on the verge of buying Ryanair?
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
A Thames
Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
It's 9:48. We're talking about driving tests. Jimmy says, I passed my driving test in 2014. However, on the driving test, I managed to stall the car twice but still passed. Apparently, it was because of the way I performed under pressure. I kept my cool. I think that is a secret to success in many, many walks of life, not least the job I do. You can be sort of paddling beneath the water, but on the top, you need to remain cool. You have to be like a little swan that's swimming along, looking very serene, but in your head, you're thinking, oh my God, what am I going to say next? Or what am I going to do next? John is in Woodford. Hello, John. Are you there, John? He's not. Let's go to Sarah in Birmingham.
Oh, hello, Ian. It's Sarah here.
Hi.
I used to be a driving instructor for 15 years. I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. And I thought the next step would be to become an examiner, which I did. And I became an examiner, and I did it for 2 years, and I hated it because it was incredibly dangerous for the examiners. So we
Why?
We were expected to go out in pupils' cars, their own cars. So that means no dual controls. Whereas if you go out and a driving instructor car, you have dual controls. But if you go out in people's own cars, you don't. You don't know this person. You have no idea what their driving is like. And I can think of at least 5 times during those 2 years, that I thought I was about to die because they did something so bad and I had no way of stopping the car because I didn't have dual controls. Luckily, I didn't die, but it was absolutely dreadful. The other reason I hated it was because we had so many people coming up for test who were fraudulent, who were not the person on the licence, and I used to refuse to take them. And then they would come up again another week, and I still refused to take them. But then I was told, oh, just take them and fail them, it doesn't matter. And I said, no, and I don't intend to be, part of this fraudulent activity.
Well, who was telling you to do that?
The people above me.
So basically, I mean, what you're saying, the whole system is rotten right from the top down.
It is rotten. And there's so much forgery going on. I mean, literally, I would walk out into the reception area and I'd call the person's name and I'd ask to see their driving licence to obviously verify who they are. And I'd look at the driving licence and I'd look at them. And I literally did say to them sometimes, you are joking with me, serious. Because it wasn't them at all. The picture is just so wrong.
And what did they then say or do? I mean, were you in danger in those situations?
Well, no, they would then go, oh, yeah, but I've lost weight and I've shaved my beard and I've done this. And I was like, no, but your ears haven't changed. Your eyes haven't changed.
Your skin colour hasn't changed.
Exactly. I said, this isn't you, is it? And they'd go, yeah, it is. And I'd say, no, sorry, I'm not taking it. I'm sorry, this is fraudulent. I'm not doing it. And they'd get sort of pretty fed up sometimes. But really, the people that were really taking the mick and were fraudulent would just go, oh, okay then, and they'd scurry out the door a bit quick because they knew that we were onto them. And I would say in a week we probably had 3 or 4 of those happen. It's really got rife in the system now where people are taking. There
must be a law against that sort. I mean, there is a law against impersonation. I mean, did nobody think, well, I'll call the police?
Well, I did. And on a few occasions I called the police and said, like, this person's turned up, da-da-da-da-da. And the police said, oh, okay, yeah, we'll send someone out. And no one ever turned up. Not once. Not once. And, there's so many things that go on. And we're expected to deal with it. And I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it because I thought, well, my life's on the block here.
Sure.
And believe me, you don't get paid a lot to do that job.
Why are there so few female driving instructors?
Instructors or examiners?
Instructors.
Instructors. There's not. There's lots of instructors, female instructors now. It's really on the increase. It's probably still male dominated, but there are a lot more females coming through. But the problem is you've got a lot of really, really bad instructors. There's some really good ones who are amazing, but there's some really bad ones. I mean, when I was an examiner, we'd look on the CCTV, see the cars come into the parking area, and we'd go, oh, God, not that one again, because you just knew they were dreadful. And it really was so sad, because these poor pupils didn't have a chance.
Yeah.
When they're being taught by somebody who has no care about them. And when at the end of it, we used to say to the instructor, what in hell were you thinking, bring them up for tests? And they go, oh, I just thought I'd give them a try. Well, no, you don't just give them a try. You bring them up when they're ready. And this is what's the problem. People are coming up for tests when they're not ready. Really not ready, and it's wasting tests.
I think there is a job going, Sarah, as the new head of the DVSA, because the previous head, somebody had the glorious name of Loveday Ryder.
She certainly did.
She's resigned, and
there's a new person already.
Oh, is there?
Yes.
Oh, I was going to put you forward. Because
I'd love to.
There's a nice salary involved, $440,000 a year.
Oh, I don't know. It's not enough, Ian. It's not enough.
I'll tell you what, it'd take more than that for me to be a driving instructor. Sarah, great call. Thank you very much. Now, the reason John in Woodford wasn't there is because it's actually Jake in Woodford and I couldn't read. Jake, hi. What would you like to tell me?
Hi, Ian. When I took my test a couple of years ago, I also had the issue of being unable to get a test unless I was willing to wait about 7+ months. And this is literally when I'm getting up first thing in the morning, Monday, 6 o'clock in the morning, on the website and booking the earliest test possible. And then when I went to my instructor, he just said, oh, Jake, I can get you a test, but, I had to pay 180 quid, not 300 like one of the other earlier callers, but I just took it because, if you do the maths, you're waiting 6+ months extra if you do it without doing the back end way, and you got to pay for lessons, which I was paying about £35 an hour. So it would be far more expensive to just wait instead of just paying the 180 quid I paid for the test and passed, thankfully.
And so you paid your driving instructor to get you the test?
Yeah. They have these chat groups and all that, and they all know the people who use these bots and things to get the tests. And that was about 2+ years ago. So I hope things have improved, but it doesn't sound like it. But I remember at the time when I was taking the tests, they were recruiting for the driving instructors, and they're only paying them £30,000, which and this was in London, so I'm not surprised that they haven't managed to recruit many examiners.
Okay, Jake, thank you very much indeed. Now, the new chief executive of the DVSA is called Beverly Warmington. And I must admit, I gave you fake news a moment ago. Her salary is not $440,000, it's around $140,000, well, $145,000 to $150,000, which to me actually doesn't seem an awful lot for somebody running an organisation of that size. It's obviously a lot more than an average wage, but if you're running an organisation which employs hundreds, if not thousands of people and is in dire straits, you would have thought they'd be offering a much higher salary than that. Chris is in Sheffield. Hello, Chris.
Yes, hi, good evening.
Evening.
I was just saying when I first called in, I've got one of two best friends. One of them, they're both driving instructors. And he's hitting hard times in so much as people don't want to take lessons for 6 months, be ready to take the test, but have to wait 12 months. So obviously they go a bit cold doing the lessons. But he looked at becoming an examiner and doing the DVSA, but didn't realise, obviously, DVSA are civil servants. They're not like driving instructors working for, AA, learn, whatever, etc. But one of the things they were exploring was making it the kind of compensation package for examiners better. But because they're civil servants, they're all tied in on the HR kind of personnel divisional kind of grading levels. And one of the dynamics when he's been speaking to examiners when he was exploring it, they said, well, we'll give examiners a pay rise. And I don't know if anybody else has mentioned this on calls earlier. One of the reasons why that's ended up being an interesting dynamic, a problematic one, is that if they give examiners more, let's say that, they're on grade 4, random number, they're at grade 4 within the civil service, everybody else on grade 4 who might work in the passport office, home office, whatever, will say, well, if those grade 4s are getting X amount, why aren't we? So they've got an interesting dynamic. They could pay examiners more to retain them and equally recruit them because they are civil servants, but then other civil servants on the same pay grade.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave, Chris. Thank you very much for being our final caller of the hour, and thank you for all of your calls and messages this evening. I'm back tomorrow from 7. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Richard Spur, but right now, and I'm sure he passed his driving test first time, it's Ben
You know what, Ian? I didn't. Third time round. I was robbed first too. Hello there, a very, very good evening to you. Ben Kentish here with you on LBC. On the programme,
they have a choice. You can say yes, and we will be very appreciative, or you can say no, and we will remember.
After months of tensions, weeks of threats, and genuine concern that Donald Trump might be on the verge of